Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Boine.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Madame le député Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara. Monsieur le député Ayer. Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves. Madame le député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Ghost. Monsieur le député Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le député Moore. Monsieur le député Mezek. Monsieur le député Osef. Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Porey. Monsieur le député War.
Présent.
Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet.
Présente.
Madame le député Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le député Millar.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet. Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis.
Présent.
Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Madame le greffier.
Prions Dieu. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton Saint-Nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que leur délibération étant accompagnée de ta bénédiction, réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui te plus de commettra le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui est aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Ne nous induis pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal, car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Défaut.
Madame le député Alves.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Ghost.
So, Deputy Gorst is out of Ireland on state's business. Could you be excused, please?
He's absent on state's business.
Yes.
State's business.
Madame le député Moore.
So, Deputy Moore is out of the state's business as well.
State's business.
Monsieur le député Mezek. Vous jurez que Monsieur le député Mezek est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député Osef.
So Deputy Osif has been at a medical appointment. He's actually on his way.
Well then, is he marked excusé? Until his attendance?
Yes, he'll be here shortly. Thank you.
Si. Les États sont constitués. Well, there are a number of subordinate, there are no communications under A, a number of subordinate enactments under B. A number of matters have been presented or laid as described on the consolidated order paper under section C. The following matters have been lodged under section D. Marine Spatial Plan, P44, lodged by the Minister for the Environment. Delivery of 3 bilingual primary schools, P45, lodged by Deputy Balash. Draft Shipping Registration Jersey Amendment Regulations, P46, lodged by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Draft Telecommunications Law Jersey Amendment Regulations, P47, lodged by the same Minister. Draft Patents Law and Registered Designs Law Jersey Amendment Regulations, P48, lodged by the Minister for External Relations. Draft Financial Services Disclosure and Provision of Information Jersey Amendment Law P49, lodged by the same Minister. Controller and Auditor General Board of Governance Appointment of Member P50, lodged by the Chief Minister. Proposed Budget Government Plan 2025 to 28, P51, lodged by the Council of Ministers. Jersey Police Complaints Authority Appointment of Chair and Member P52, lodged by the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs. Draft Multinational Taxation Global Anti-Base Erosion HR Tax Jersey Law, P53, lodged by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Draft Multinational Corporation Income Tax Jersey Law, P54, lodged by the same Minister. Nationality Act's extension to Jersey, P55, lodged by the Chief Minister. Draft Family Division Registrar Change of Status and Title Jersey Law, P56, lodged by the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs. Social Security Medical Appeal Tribunal Appointment of Members, P57, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. Income Support Medical Appeal Tribunal Appointment of Members, P58, lodged by the same Minister. Draft Income Support Amendment Regulations, P59, lodged by the same Minister. Under E, I can announce that in accordance with Standing Order 34.1, the proposer of the following proposition lodged au greffe has informed the greffier of the states it is to be withdrawn. P19, minimum wage increase to match the living wage, which was lodged by Deputy Andrews. There is nothing under F, G, H. We come to questions. Answers to written questions have been provided, and members should have copies of each of those. We come now to oral questions, and the first oral question is by Deputy Southern to be asked of the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to the recent use of the drug Kaftrio in the treatment of a specific mutation of cystic fibrosis, will the Minister advise what mechanisms, if any, are in place to provide this treatment to other patients suffering from this long-term condition?
Minister.
Sir, there is a mechanism in place that can facilitate the provision of treatment for the specific condition mentioned by the Deputy, and it's the same one that was deployed in the case referred to in his question. Given that the treatment involves a very high-cost drug, the patient's clinician is required to submit an independent patient funding request, or IPFR, to the IPFR panel. In the event that that doesn't prove successful, the clinician can then refer it to a separate IPFR appeal panel. This was the route taken, sir, recently when this first successful applicant, and I remain grateful to the Deputy for raising the issue in the Assembly, given that it gave rise to this successful appeal. Through this process, which applies to all such drugs, it's not unusual for a trial period to be approved, so that the effectiveness of the treatment can be assessed. And in the event of it proving successful, ongoing treatment can then be sanctioned. Finally, sir, I'm happy to inform the Assembly that in this initial case, the treatment has worked well and the ongoing treatment has been approved. In addition to that, 2 further patients have now been approved for a 3-month trial period. So I think it's safe to assume that the application mechanism we have in place is working appropriately. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental, Deputy?
Supplementary, yes, sir. Just in general, to what extent do the UK NICE guidelines apply in Jersey, and how independent is Jersey in order to assess such treatments?
Sir, I'm aware that Deputy Southern keeps a very close eye on this, and as I've stated, I'm grateful to him for doing so. There's been some correspondence in the middle of August relating to this. It's not a matter I've had a chance to address, but I have got an appointment with the Deputy Medical Director on Monday to go into that in more detail. So I'm very happy to keep the Deputy informed as things progress, sir.
Very well, we come to the next question, which the Connétable St Saviour will ask of the Chief Minister. Connétable.
Thank you, sir. Well, further to news that Guernsey may lose its mail plane due to Royal Mail funding cuts, will the Minister consider engaging with its Guernsey counterparts to discuss sharing the cost of the mail plane to both islands? And if not, why not?
Good. Thank you, sir. Thank you. The short answer to that is yes, the government would consider opening discussions along those lines. However, governments have not previously funded this service, and there is no provision to do so, although successful talks could lead to a new provision being found, sir. I have since discovered that the cost is no longer viable, given the significant drop in the delivery of mail, sir, to and from the island. The costs for the annual cost for a mail plane was £6 million per annum, with 1.2 million being covered by the post office in Jersey and the rest by Royal Mail. So I think commercially, whilst I'm prepared to have discussions with Guernsey, being realistic, I think it's going to be commercially unviable.
Supplemental question, Connétable?
Thank you, sir. I thank the Chief Minister for his answer, sir, but there are many daily flights from the UK, British Airways and many other flights on a daily basis. Could some arrangement be made so that they could carry the mail to both islands? And obviously supplements by both islands, sir. Thank you.
I'm not sure of the freight carrying capacity arrangements in relation to the commercial air passenger services, sir. But I know officials have discussed the matter with the Post Office, who feel that the new arrangements have settled down well with no disruption to the service. But I will undertake to have those discussions and report back to the Constable, sir.
Very well, we come to the next question 3. The Deputy Morel will ask the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to the announcement that the minimum wage will be set as a living wage, will the Minister advise what guidelines will be provided to small businesses to ensure that they are fully aware of all the steps they are required to take to access the proposed government package to help employers transition to a higher minimum wage? And when will the guidelines be available? Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. Sir, further information on the Living Wage Transition Fund will be published in the coming weeks. This will let businesses know more detail about the different packages available, the activity that grants will look to support, and the application process. Full details on the process will be communicated to businesses, including small businesses, by the end of the year to raise awareness of the support available ahead of the grants going live in January next year. In the meantime, we have been, for a number of months, liaising with professional bodies in the island, such as the Chamber of Commerce, the Jersey Farmers Union, the Hospitality Association, etc., to apprise them of the details so that they can inform their members as well. So.
Supplemental question, Deputy Morel.
No, thank you, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for the Minister for giving me details further for the businesses and small businesses. Would the Minister advise if the charitable sector would be included in this living wage transition fund?
Yes, very good question. I thank the Deputy for that question. The answer is that yes, charitable organisations will be able to access at least some of the funds. And the reason I say at least some of them is because one of them, for instance, is a revamped tourism development fund. So that will be for visitor economy businesses. So unless there is a charitable organisation operating within the visitor economy, it then wouldn't be able to access that fund. but certainly other ones such as productivity support scheme, training and so on, they will be able to access.
Supplemental question, Deputy Clerk.
Sure, and thank you for the Minister. And good news, the charitable sector would be included. I know until now it was engagement with the businesses, and Minister had the meetings. Have any meetings taken place to explore transition to the living wage with the charitable sector?
Personally, I haven't had any personal meetings with them. I'd have to check with officers as to whether they have had or not, but I will find out and endeavour to tell the Deputy. I fear the answer is actually we haven't.
Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir, building on that question, can the Minister give assurances that the funds that will be put in place will be available and targeted not just at the obvious rural economy and hospitality sectors, but at all businesses, particularly, say, small businesses operating in other sectors, so that they are also targeted and made aware of the possibilities?
What I can say is that is absolutely the case, that certainly certain elements of the funding will be available to all businesses in the island, and there won't be a distinction as to whether they were a minimum wage payer before or not. The opportunity that arises with this move to the living wage is the opportunity to move towards a more resilient and robust economy. And we want to do that by helping businesses become more productive and therefore taking away some of their reliance on labour, which should therefore reduce the impact of the minimum wage. And so a fund such as the Productivity Support Scheme will be absolutely available to all businesses, particularly small businesses, and they are the ones that we would be seeking to support. So there won't be the case that some businesses will not be able to. But obviously where there are themed funds, such as before mentioned Tourism Development Fund, that would be only for businesses within that sector of the economy. But the Productivity Support Scheme will be available to all.
Supplemental question,
So I wonder if the Minister could explain a little bit more about the way in which he's going to ensure that the funds are used, are targeted in such a way that they don't disadvantage businesses that are already paying the living wage and will now be competing with businesses that are being subsidised to pay the living wage.
I'm very pleased with that question, and I thank the Deputy. And the reason is because the Deputy used the word subsidy, and the whole point of this support scheme is that it is not subsidy, and it is not targeted solely at businesses that pay the living wage or currently pay the minimum wage. The support scheme is there to help people, help businesses and organisations, employers, become more productive, and that's where the opportunity to have a more resilient and productive economy lies. And so these funds will be available to all organisations that employ people, and there will be no distinction as to whether the organisation paid the minimum wage or didn't pay the minimum wage. So this is neither the subsidy for the minimum wage, it is grant giving to enable businesses to become more productive and resilient.
I have Deputy Jones, Southern, Ozef and Warren. No further supplemental questions. I'm sorry, I'm not taking any further beyond that.
Sorry, sir. I pressed my button. I saw you nodded towards me.
I'm afraid there were a number of people who pressed their buttons, and unless I absolutely fix your eyes and nod towards you, I'm afraid I didn't actually see you. It's one of those things. Deputy Jeune?
So actually, Deputy Renouf and then the Minister's answers actually helped with a number of questions. So very short, the Minister mentioned that it would be grants. Will there be a mixture of grants and loans? We're about to talk about agricultural loans later, or will it just be grants within this package?
I thank the Deputy for the question. At the moment, it's envisaged to be kind of matched grants, so a proportion paid by the employer and to some extent matched by the government. That's how it's envisaged at the moment. But the actual, with what we're looking at the moment, is perhaps something along the lines of 75% from the government, 25% from the employer.
Supplemental question? Yeah. Deputy Sutton.
Yes, sir. A minor question, but might be an important one. I thought I heard in the Minister's answer him refer to information will be available in the coming weeks, plural, and it might have been week, which is a vast difference. Which was it? Was it in the coming weeks or coming week?
Thanks I thank Deputy Sutton. It's weeks, plural, so end of this month, beginning of next month.
Supplemental, Deputy Sutton. Deputy Joseph.
Deputy Sutton has asked asked the same question as I would, but may I just clarify, for the avoidance of any doubt, I'm just looking at standing orders in the Public Finances Law. There are limitations on the ability for members to amend propositions brought by the Council under the Public Finances Law. This presumably deals with funds and other matters. Could the Minister clarify beyond doubt kindly whether or not all of the information for the setting up of all of the funds and the detail will be available in that month that he says, because we're 11 weeks away from the budget and there are limitations about when things can be amended, and I think that's what Deputy Sutton was wanting. So could you maybe set out a timetable of what's going to come out when, so members are clear? Thank you, sir.
I thank Deputy, because I think that's an excellent request, and certainly we'll make all that detail available. Like I said, it should be the end of this month, beginning of next month.
Supplemental question, Deputy Joseph.
The Minister said, I know he's being careful, he said should be. Will he upgrade that to a will be in order to facilitate the Assembly being able to make necessary scrutiny arrangements and amendments as necessary?
Sir, I say should purely because if a piece of information was missing at the point of publication, then that's why I say it. So the intention is that all the information will be available. In the event that an error means that something is not available, that is why I say should. The intention is absolutely to make it all available to everybody in the States Assembly and outside. There's no intention to hide anything or hold anything back. But obviously, sometimes errors occur, and that was the sole reason for the word should.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. The Minister's mentioned about, we're talking about the transition to a living wage and talked about productivity gains. Are there any support mechanisms in place, or will there be some in place, for those employees unfortunate enough to lose their jobs as a result of these productivity gains?
So that would be a question better placed for the Minister for Social Security. From the perspective of this support scheme, I don't believe there is any element which is aimed at employees who lose jobs. As a result of it, they would be passed into the social security system and would gain access to funding that way, not through this support.
Supplemental question, Deputy Ward.
No, thank you, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Porritt.
Not at this stage, thank you.
Very well. When we come to question 4, the Deputy General will ask the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister clarify the role of the States of Jersey Development Company in the redevelopment of Fort Regent, including details of who will finance any work under which specific budget it will fall, what deliverables have been agreed with the company, and when the Assembly will have any sight of any of the proposed plans?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for her question. Sir, the fort's at a crossroads in its life, and successive governments have grappled with bringing forward a viable plan that will ensure its future as an asset for islanders and visitors to enjoy. So we are working along similar lines to the previous government. At the Regeneration Steering Group's first meeting in May this year, it was agreed that the States of Jersey Development Company would take on the role of project manager to develop new plans aimed at breathing life back into the Fort Regent in a way that is both sustainable and viable. At this time, States of Jersey Development Company's role is to progress plans for essential refurbishment works to the structure, while simultaneously developing a viable plan for its future use, which will be consulted on. This planning work is being funded by the States of Jersey Development Company, utilising the remaining funds from the College Gardens development, and the longer-term funding for the delivery of the project remains under consideration and will be brought to the Assembly in due course.
Supplemental question?
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister confirm whether all the land currently comprising Fort Regent will remain under public ownership once the regeneration of Fort Regent begins, and whether any part of it is planned to transfer to SOJDC?
Thank you, sir. It's my belief that all of the land will belong to the government, sir, and there's been no discussions about transferring any of the land. Thank you.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. What consultation or input will the likes of Jersey Heritage and perhaps other organisations like the National Trust, but predominantly the former, have in the plans for developing or regenerating Fort Regent?
Thank you, sir. So the organisations mentioned by the Deputy clearly are key stakeholders. The fort is not only a great asset to us, it's an important historical monument for the island, and in fact it's one of the best examples in Europe. So we'll be consulting widely with key stakeholder groups, including the two mentioned by the Deputy, and a wider group as well. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy? Nadia?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Has consideration been given to the somewhat radical idea of actually reverting Fort Regent to become primarily and perhaps even exclusively a historic fort and nothing else?
So I believe that the fort can provide a lot more than being an historic monument, sir. There is lots of opportunity for both islanders and visitors alike at the fort, and for us to maintain the fort and make sure that it's viable, we need to make sure that it's revenue incoming. Thank you.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The Minister said that the project would use funds from the College Garden development. Does the Minister agree it would be better for SOJDC to return profits from any developments to the government, who could then redisperse either to SOJDC or other developers for Fort Regent with greater transparency?
It's an interesting question, sir. We were looking for funding for this project, sir, and we've identified the monies from the College Gardens development as being suitable to carry on with these works. So what we want to do is to proceed as quickly as we possibly can. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister commit to ensuring then that any proposed costs borne by the State of Jersey Development Company for feasibility, planning and pre-development work are published in advance of that work and shared with members of the State Assembly in the same way feasibility projects within the government are on page 54 of the Budget 2025?
So I think that's an important point that the Deputy raises, sir. And as I mentioned earlier, the longer term funding for the delivery of the project remains under consideration before it's brought back to the Assembly. And I'd imagine when it's brought back to the Assembly, we'll explain what has been spent by this government to date. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Stevenson, Deputy Gardner, then the final supplementary. Deputy Stevenson. Nothing further, I should say.
Thank you, sir. Does the brief given to the SOJDC include the return of sport to the fort, and if so, in what capacity?
So it's certainly my intention that there will be an element of sport at Fort Regent, sir. I think it's too early to say the details of that, but certainly I know an area that the Deputy and I are both keen on is having some skate facility in St Helier, and that's certainly part of the brief, sir. Thank you.
Further supplement?
Thank you, sir. And does the Minister believe that there is still a need for large, flexible indoor public spaces, such as those currently provided at the fort by the Queen's and Gloucester Halls, for our sporting community as well as for others?
I do, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Follow the brief that was given to SOJDC. Was brief identified that the ramparts and outdoor spaces will continue to be freely accessible as a public spaces in St Helier.
So the ramparts give a great opportunity to view both the east and west of the island as well as St Helier, sir, and I'd like to think they would get far more usage from both residents and visitors alike, sir. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
The question was, would it be continue in the brief to be freely accessible, whatever development will be done?
Discussions about the funding for Fort Regent, sir, are ongoing. Thank you. Ideally, it would be free, sir, but I can't make that commitment today. Thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. Has there been consideration to any other publicly owned land that would be beneficial for SOJDC to support the government with their regeneration plans? And could the Minister provide an idea of what these could be?
Sir, today we're talking about Fort Regent, sir, and that's what I'm here to talk about.
Yes, I was about to say that was, I think, so perilously close it actually crossed the line to not being directly relevant to the question. So I don't allow that. Very well. We come to question 5. The Deputy Doublé will ask of the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister state whether he intends to publish a report detailing the Early Years Nursery Provision Action Plan as set out on page 10 of the Government Plan 2024 to 2027, and if not, why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. So whilst this was a commitment in the previous government plan, sorry, it's not my water bottle over, I will be pleased to provide the Assembly with an action plan on early years provisions. It will provide details of and progression against the ambitions I've set out in the Common Strategic Policy. Currently, I've asked officers to prioritise delivery of a series of pilots that show that we can make a positive impact at pace. And I'll present the plan by the end of October to help inform the debate on the budget, which includes the financial implications of these plans. So, thank you.
Supplemental question?
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased that the Minister is intending to produce this action plan. Could he outline whether his long-term vision would be contained within that and give us some insight as to what the long-term vision for early years is beyond the targeted 2 to 3 funding that's in the current proposals?
Thank you, sir. The crux of that plan will be to focus on the aims of the CSP and the delivery of 2 to 3-year-old spaces and increase provision that is both sustainable and appropriate for what we need on the island. Beyond that, extending that into lower ages is the best phrase I can think of, babies and so on, would absolutely be an ambition, an aim. Whether that will happen before the end of this term, being realistic, I'm not so sure, because we have a lot of work to do in providing the nursery provision first. As the Deputy knows, it can be a challenging area because of the nuances of increasing that need and making it a sustainable provision in the long term. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. My panel brought this amendment to the government plan with the intention of enabling the department to have sufficient time to compose a plan, and we considered a deadline would be beneficial, bearing in mind that an extension of childcare is a principal aim of this government. Does the Minister not think that this should have been prioritised and continue to be prioritised?
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy. So there's 2 types of priority. There's prioritising producing plans and ideas, and there's prioritising delivery of actual actions. I've prioritised the delivery of actions, which we will be reporting on, and I'm quite happy with that, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Curtis?
Yes, sir. Will the Minister confirm that the plan will have included full consultation with all nursery providers?
Yes, sir, it absolutely does. There was communication with all nursery providers that's ongoing. However, we also need to lead in terms of the nursery provision that's required, and that will mean actually starting pilots, testing their appropriateness, whether they're working, whether they're sustainable, and then trying to engage everybody so that we can increase that provision, sir. We have a very wide provision of nursery on the island, from private to schools to third sector, which is probably the wrong term, but I think everybody knows what I mean by that. And we have to bring all of those together in terms to do that work. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. The Minister, in his answer, used the word realistic. Would the Minister advise to the Assembly what he sees as realistic to deliver by 2026 within this?
Yes, thank you, sir. And I'm pleased with that question because it is about realism. But within that realism, there must be some ambition. And the ambition is to deliver a sustainable structure of nursery provision for 2 to 3-year-olds so that we can introduce a NEF provision of, at the moment, the plan is for 15 hours because that will help parents. I think, sir, that by piloting, by engaging in the way that we are, by looking at where that provision is, we will be able to do that. Plus, it will also uncover what that provision actually is. I personally believe, sir, that if we provide more nursery places, make them available for 2 to 3-year-olds, there may be families that at the moment aren't saying that they want nursery provision, but when it's there, they may want to use it. So those numbers may change as well. So we have to be adaptable, realistic, but the ambition is by 2026, I hope that we can introduce the 15 hours of NEF funding. But we'll do that as appropriate, sir.
Deputy Millar, we don't normally allow ministers to ask questions of ministers. Your light's on.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. That's mistake.
Not at all. Supplemental question, Deputy Gardner?
Thank you, sir. If just making sure that I understood correct, that the ambition and hopefully realistic to introduce 15 hours NEF for 2 to 3-year-old. When I looked at the government plan, and I would like to check the budget realistic, or we would need to require more budget, the rough calculation, NEF to 3 to 4 year old, approximately just under 4 million, which half of it will require 2 million for 15 hours. We know that 2 to 3 year old provision is more expensive to deliver than 3 to 4 year old provision. What budget minister has in mind to deliver 15 hours 2 to 3 year old provision?
Thank you, sir. The CSP revenue expenditure growth table for extended nursery and childcare provision puts aside £1.517 million 2025, 2.358 million in 2026, 3.423 million in 2027 and 4.629 million in 2028. So money has been put aside to address nursery provision as that provision grows. Plus also we'll go through another process of government funding next year, and if the provision is in place before 2026, there will be an opportunity there. I will say, sir, and I'm going to say it again, I keep saying it about education, I don't like the word cost, I think we should use the word investment. So if you have to go for more investment in this, it's a good investment. It's a good investment for our families, it's a good investment for our young people, it's a good investment for our economy, and therefore it's a good investment for our island. Thank you, sir.
Joseph.
Thank you, sir. The ambition of the Minister is undoubted. I am aware, I think, that there was an indication that the plan would be available by the 1st of September, and we're past that. But I wonder whether or not the Minister could inform the Assembly, in order to deliver nursery as is envisaged, the staff are going to be required to in the nurseries that are going to be funded there. What is the Minister's view of the capacity, availability and actions that are going to take in order to ensure that the staff are there, moreover that they are appropriately remunerated?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Deputy. I do thank the Deputy because it gives me a chance to plug the campaign that we'll be starting very soon for early years recruitment. I recorded a little piece myself. Perhaps members can ignore that piece and move on to the more detailed piece. But certainly one of the successes, for example, was to recruit teaching assistants in a similar way. So we're using the same process to look at recruiting for early years. The number of places of training in early years at Highlands College has increased. Please don't ask me the number because I genuinely don't know it off the top of my head. We also, though, sir, want to try and attract a different demographic. There will be people who are returning to the workplace who may want to get involved with early years and train to that satisfying role with dealing with our young people. There may be, sir, people who have brought up their own families, are returning to work and have skills that with a bit of training they can use within this sector. So I think there is a demographic, there is a workforce outlet that we can attract. And of course, one of the benefits of a living wage is exactly that. In all of our sectors, we will have a living wage.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
I thank the Minister for his reply, but I wonder whether or not he would assist me and other members in providing some data. We all laud his ambition to get locals into childcare. That sounds a great idea. But the reality is that there's going to be inevitably a requirement for inbound migrant workers. Is he able to actually provide some statistics of the split of existing childcare workers? How many are local? How many are under the 5-year rule? How many are subject to work permits? And how that might change even despite his ambitions, and he could set out what his ambitions are in terms of local recruitment.
So a simple answer is no, I can't produce that stood here at this moment. That's an interesting piece of data, exactly the type of data we'll be looking, because we need that if we're going to train our own. We will always have a balance between those coming onto the island to work, those who are training here. But one of the things I do want to target is those who live on island and might want to return to work and enter that sector. Because there are simple reasons, so is that they're already living here, they have housing, they may have families, there's a stable workforce. And it's also a workforce that can train here. I have no problem with workers coming from abroad. We will always need that to some extent. But so I think that balance will be there. In terms of the data and what that balance is now and what it will be into the future, I've got to say so, I think that will be a very transient number because it depends on what we need and how successful we are in the provision of nursery places.
So just to make sure my question was answered, I did ask the Minister kindly to produce the data, not on his feet, but could he commit to at least producing the data that is now, which was the subject of my question?
So I'd asked the Deputy to email me with the specifics of what data he was talking about, because if I'm honest, I can't remember what he said.
I have Deputy Jean, and then final supplementary. No further questions. Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. From the Minister's answers to oral question 142 in the States Assembly on the 16th of July, the Minister made it very clear that the parents need to sign up to nursery places in February and March for the following September. So any actions would have to focus on February and March. So could the Minister give assurance to parents that there will be changes in February, March, and there will be progression, not an action plan, but actually action. And we will see this in February and March when those places will come up for September 2025. And if not, why not?
The simple answer is yes. But on top of that, it depends what you mean by nursery places. If you mean 2 to 3 year olds, there are places for babies as well, which are much more flexible in terms of when they start. I think we need to build some flexibility into our system, sir. So when nursery places become available throughout the year, they may be available to parents. So my answer would be yes, but when things come on stream, sir, I would like to have the flexibility that they come in when they're needed. And I know that's difficult, but when my kids were young, so we were looking for nursery places, we would have snapped up any place at any time, to be quite frank, and worked around it. And I know that's what parents are doing all of the time anyway. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Chair.
So just to ask the Minister, so will anything new and additional be happening to help parents in February, March to sign up for nursery places in September, or will it continue as it is present and was last year? Is there anything new that we can see, an increase in additional for February, March?
So, yeah, if the Deputy is referring to next February, March, which he must do, because we can't go back in time, yes, I would hope that there would be more places available in September 26, absolutely. My issue was that they're not available early enough, and so we're trying to introduce some earlier in 2025. So yes, absolutely, certainly in 2026, that's what will be available, and of course they'll be applied for in February, March 2025. So yeah, I don't see any change to that system, sir. I hope I've answered the Deputy's question. Thank you.
Well, final supplementary, Deputy Dubé.
Thank you, sir. I wish the Minister luck with delivering all these priorities. And what I wanted to understand was the growth money in the proposed budget. Is that to serve families who aren't already receiving any 2 to 3 spaces, or is this a continuation for families who are already accessing this for their children?
Thank you, sir. It would be, the main element of it would be to extend, because it does say extend nursery and childcare provision in the line, so it's about extending. This is the point, sir. We could, I mean, there is a decision to be made. Do we introduce the 15 hours now and just pay what's already there and not extend? Or do we want to target the money to extend nursery provision so that it's more across working families, sir, and then we can extend that and make that decision as to how we're going to support families when they want that provision. But yeah, the CSP is about extending those places, sir. Thank you.
We now come to question 6. The Deputy Miles will ask the Minister for the Environment. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to the announcement by Lloyds Bank that it is to close its St Brelard branch and the level of empty commercial properties in Llanelwedd Precinct and Parade, will the Minister provide an update on the status of the West of Ireland planning framework as set out in Strategic Proposal 4 of the Bridging Island Plan?
Thank you, sir. Sir, the development of the West of Ireland planning framework is one of 40 proposals in the Bridging Island Plan and has yet to commence. Previous island plans have sought to focus much of the island's development needs on St Helier, but the purpose of developing a master plan for the west of the island is to explore whether there is current or increased potential for the west of the island, which of course includes Llanelwedd, to provide new development opportunities for homes, business and community facilities. And I can tell the Deputy that of the 40 Bridging Island Plan proposals, 7 have been completed, 22 are in progress and 11 have yet to commence.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
I thank the Minister for the answer. Given that a quarter of the population of the island live out west, this is not just a St Brelard issue, does the Minister agree that maintaining services in the west of the island is critical to reducing traffic congestion in town and therefore consistent with reducing our carbon footprint? And if so, will he consider allocating funds to accelerate the development of the West of Island plan?
Certainly, sir, the facts that the Deputy quotes, a lot of people live in the west of the island, there is a centre there already. And the Bridging Island plan seeks to maintain and enhance the viability and the vitality of these areas. But it is a challenge. The internet has changed the way people shop. But the plan, the current Bridging Island plan, seeks to retain development, retail development in these areas. But it also provides flexibility to allow other forms of development to be used under a series of tests. So the answer is yes. Obviously, there is a future for Lykeneve, an important future for the retail area at Lykeneve. It's a difficult balance to try to protect it when it's not used. We don't want to give it away through change of use to other uses. But at the same time, we need to provide the facilities there for the residents. So I say to the Deputy, as soon as I have the money, I will do this work. And obviously, there's 11 pieces of work still to be commenced. That work will have to be done before the next island plan debate.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. This question ultimately is about Lloyds Bank, sir, and the closure of the branch at Red Houses. Can the Minister advise whether or not such change of use or closure of key facilities in what has been billed as Jersey's second urban centre is what was envisaged under the Bridging Island plan?
I'm not sure that I particularly completely understand the question here, sir. I don't think there was an expectation in the Bridging Island plan that any bank was going to close. Obviously, there's a massive challenge to banks with people moving from visiting banks on a weekly basis to then sitting at home in front of a PC to now people pay their bills while they're waiting for a bus or pay in cheques while they're having a cup of coffee with friends. Banking is challenging, and maintaining all these old traditional branches, if you like, is a challenge. I think the Deputy's question about change of use would be an interesting one, but I would imagine that banking would come under retail, so another retail outlet in that building would be allowed.
Supplemental question, Deputy Tadier.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That doesn't provide much comfort, I don't think, just saying another retail, because, for example, if it were pharmacy, there are lots of pharmacies already in St Brelard, but banks seem to be moving out. I'll ask specifically, the island plan on page 67 says that the island's second urban centre is Lykeneve, and it will be a key community focus for the provision of homes. Therefore, the island plan is saying there will be more homes built around Lykeneve over the next few years. But if there are fewer facilities such as banking in those areas, is that not going to throw out the balance that is seeking to be struck in the Bridging Island plan? And does that concern the Minister?
Obviously, sir, planning is a particularly challenging thing, and the Deputy throws up a challenge here. On one hand, we want to protect the retail structures, if you like, in Kenneway, in the precinct and in the parade. We could, I guess, convert them through change of use to housing, and we create more housing with less retail. The plan at the moment will protect those retail shops, those retail businesses, buildings, if you like, for further retail until such a point as a change of use application comes in and alternative use, better use is found. But at the moment, what we need to do is to protect those parts of Kenneway and parts of the west of the island which are already in retail, so that when we build more houses, yes, those facilities are there for residents to use. What I wouldn't want to see happen is the few, or maybe a few more than a few, retail outlets that are closed at the moment get the benefit of a change of use to housing, and then be lost forever for retail. There's got to be a really good reason to have a change of use approved for all these structures.
Well, I have Deputy Renouf, Deputy Alex Curtis, then final supplementary. No other questions. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. The Minister says that there were 40-odd action points in the Island Plan, but there were only half a dozen or so strategic priorities, and this West of Island Planning Framework was a strategic priority. And I therefore would push the Minister on this point. My ministerial plan before I left office included the West of Island Planning Framework as in the work stream for 2025. Will he commit to continue that work in 2025?
Sir, I can't give the Deputy that commitment today. Master planning or development of guidance, there's a number of these proposals, including the St Billard's Bay Improvement Plan, and I've spoken to Deputy Scott about this, the development of Five Oaks Master Plan. They're there to inform the next island plan. None of them have commenced, and even the St Billard's Bay one, which had an actual time frame on it of 2025, I've had to explain to the Deputy why that's not possible. I need to work on priorities. There's planning reform, water, PFAS, marine spatial plan, supporting agriculture and fisheries, and offshore wind. There's just a very short list of really important things I have to do, on top of which my government has, well, the government I'm part of, have committed to reduce expenditure, committed to reduce the use of consultants. We have a number of priorities that we're trying to fit in here. So I say to the Deputy, yes, this work will be done, but I cannot commit to doing it in 2025 because my priorities for next year are already set.
Supplemental question, Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir. I think Deputy Tadier raised some of the important issues here, that this is about conflicts, and those are precisely the sorts of things that a master plan is designed to help resolve. There was widespread cynicism, I think, in St Brelade when Lekeneve was announced as the second urban centre, and the West of Ireland planning framework was supposed to put the flesh on the bones. Can I therefore ask if the West of Ireland planning framework has been removed from the ministerial work plan, why that decision was made, the work plan for next year, why that decision was made, and what was put in its place, because it was clearly possible when I left office.
Well, sir, one of the reasons that it is possible to delay certain pieces of work, and in this case, the West of Ireland, is that the current planning policy of the Bridging Island Plan seeks to maintain and enhance the retail viability of the defined area of Lekeneve. It includes the bank, it includes the parade and the precinct, and it does this by supporting protection and maintenance of those retail uses. However, it does also provide flexibility, as I've said, to allow other forms of development, and if change of use application comes in, there's a number of tests the application would have to be subject to, and if it passes that, yes, change of use will be allowed, but this is a challenge. We do need to maintain retail centres for these areas, especially Keneve in the west of the island, and we do that through the current plan. So while a new strategy, a new plan for the west of Ireland would be great, it doesn't mean that there isn't protection, there aren't plans in place, there aren't policies in place in the current Bridging Island plan to allow change and work to happen.
Point of order, if I may.
Point of order?
Well, can I ask you to rule whether that was answered the question? Because I did ask why the work had been removed from the work stream.
Well, my understanding of the answer was because there were a number of balancing priorities, and therefore I inferred that was the reason that the Minister was giving. But if I'm wrong about that, Minister?
I'm happy to clarify, sir, the two reasons. One you've already mentioned. There are a number of other priorities, but also the fact that there is currently in the Bridging Island plan a policy that works for Keneve at the moment. It's not as if there are no plans, there are no policy in the plan for that area currently.
Well, Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The Minister has now touched on this, but given he has confirmed the delaying of work on a West of Ireland planning framework, will he commit to ensuring that his department and planning decision makers do give full effect to the guidance around the protection of employment land and the tests he references, specifically with regard to the 2012 protection of employment land supplementary planning guidance, and work with his department on a more robust process for consistent determination against this to retain the viability of units in the west of the island until such a framework is delivered.
Yes, sir, and it would be my hope, my ambition that everybody in the department, whether that is from a junior planning officer that's just arrived in the department 6 months ago, all the way through senior planning officers, planning committee inspectors and myself, would all take a consistent view of policies within the island plan. But the point I would make to the Deputy is that developing new guidance, if you like, in the same way that we develop supplementary planning guidance, cannot move away from the policies which are in the current island plan without coming back to this Assembly to change those policies. So while new guidance is really helpful and it puts more flesh on the bone, more detail for applicants and developers to come forward with their plans, the really important thing is the policies in the island plan which are debated in this Assembly cannot change, and guidance, whether it's supplementary or otherwise, can only put detail, it can't change policy.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you, sir, and I completely agree, and I wasn't suggesting new guidance that deviates from the BIP policies. I would ask the Minister again, though, if he would consider improving the processes around the documentation and recording of the tests of redundancy and the policy tests to ensure more consistent tests and to greater protect employment sites in the west of the island.
I'll do my best to do that, sir. As the Deputy well knows, I really like consistency. I like it to be the same rules to be applied to everybody at all times.
Final supplementary, Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Minister for all of his answers. It strikes me that there may well be policies in place to protect and develop retail in the West, but they're clearly not working. We have at least 7 empty properties, commercial units in the Kennervay precinct and Parade, and certainly there seems to be more units that are closing than opening. So my question really is, all of his answers lead to the conclusion that a master plan is absolutely critical to community development in the west of the island. He's already said that he needs to work on other priorities. I can't speak for the Western Conotable and the other Western deputies, but for my part, we would consider this to be an absolute priority. And because this is a priority, would the Minister agree to consider at least moving the Western planning framework up his priority list?
So I'm very happy to consider moving the planning framework up the priority list. I'll take the points the Deputy and others have made on board and go away and discuss it with officers.
Well, we come now to question 7. The Deputy Coles will ask the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide an update on the procurement process for the passenger and freight ferry services and state when the Assembly can expect to be informed as to who has been awarded the contract?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank the Deputy for his question. Sir, as members are likely to be aware, there has been competitive interest in providing future sea connectivity under a combined contractual arrangement with the governments of Jersey and Guernsey. Whilst securing the right outcome carries a very high political priority, the work is led and undertaken by officials who will make an objective, evidence-based recommendation to me and my counterpart in Guernsey for final political approval in October. I currently expect you in a position to inform members and the public of the successful bidder during October. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Coles.
Yes, sir. Does this October date follow the original timeline provided when the procurement process started? And if not, can the Minister confirm why any delays?
Sir, there have been no delays during the tender process that I am aware of. It has always been the domain of the tenderer to be able to change the order or the sequence of the process as they wish. And so any media reports suggesting there were delays, I would say were not entirely accurate. The end of September, October has always been the envisaged time for making announcements, sir, to the best of my knowledge.
Deputy Tallier.
Could the Minister clarify who his counterpart in Guernsey is, whether he has met with that person, and whether they have discussed their preference for the successor or the continuation of the ferry operator, and whether they are in agreement? Sorry for all of those questions.
I thank the Deputy, sir. I am in regular contact with my counterpart in Guernsey. It's Deputy Neil Inder, is President of the Economic Development Committee in Guernsey. Indeed, I was on the phone to him yesterday evening. But, sir, we don't discuss preferences because we don't have preferences. We are awaiting the official report, the report from the officials that will provide an objective recommendation, sir. It is not for Deputy Inder or myself to preempt that recommendation. And so, no, discussion of preferences is not a discussion we've had. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Tadier?
Yeah. Once the decision's been made, does the Minister envisage that any transitional arrangements will need to be put in place, including any interventions by government? And what might those transitional arrangements look like?
So it is quite possible that transitional arrangements may be necessary, particularly if the incumbent operator isn't successful in this bid. And so there is the possibility that transitional arrangements may be necessary. The exact look of those transitional arrangements I couldn't describe at the moment.
Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir. I wonder if the Minister could talk a little bit about the process that will be gone through. There are obviously two potential areas of disagreement between Jersey and Guernsey. Officers could disagree in their recommendation, and even if there's a joint recommendation, ministers could disagree on how to approach that. So I wonder if he could say a little bit about what the process is that's been put in place to deal with those potential eventualities.
So the process, precisely for the reasons that the Deputy has just outlined, these matters we attempted to deal with in advance of embarking upon the process. So there is actually an agreement in the form of a memorandum of understanding between myself and Deputy Inder as to how we will work in the event of disagreement. And part of that agreement is obviously for both parties, both islands, to work together in very good faith to try to ensure that we do come to an agreement at the end of it. So officers have similarly worked together, and the kind of tender documents, as I understand, have been shared between officers in both islands, and officers in both islands have been talking to each other and engaging with each other throughout that process, again with the aim of avoiding any disagreement at the end of it. So.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, sir. I take it that the Minister is being a little coy about the details of that memorandum of understanding because it's sort of a confidential document. Could he say, though, whether the weighting attached to the discussions, if you like, is equal? In other words, Guernsey and Jersey will have an equal say, the officers will have an equal say, and so on in that.
Yes, sir, this is an entirely 50-50 experience, so to speak, and Jersey and Guernsey's say are entirely equal in this. It is correct, the Deputy is correct to say that it's a confidential memorandum of understanding. This is because it is between Jersey and another jurisdiction, and when it comes to correspondence between different jurisdictions, that does tend to remain confidential. But it is also very simple, and in essence could be summed up as working in very good faith with each other. So.
Final supplementary, Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. During the procurement process, did the Minister outline any must-have non-negotiables to exist within the contract? And if so, what were his priorities?
Thank you, sir. Priorities were around reliability, frequency, future fleet investments, sir, strengthening the southern supply route, and the frequency and reliability comes, and also kind of operating times that work for islanders. So it's a much more kind of customer-centric perspective. And so that has all been there. as the framework that we wanted tenderers to respond to. How different organisations respond to each criteria is entirely up to them. So there is, I found it interesting, there's a balance to be struck between being prescriptive in terms of saying what we would like to see for the island, but at the same time not wanting to stifle any innovation or any interesting ideas which we couldn't have come up with ourselves because we're not in the business. So the tender is also designed to encourage those respondents to it to provide their own new and innovative ideas, particularly around fleet investment and particularly around sustainable transport going into the future. So.
Well, we come to question 8. The Deputy Tadier will ask the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you. Given the sizable population of Portuguese speakers in Jersey, are there any plans to introduce Portuguese as a language option during the regular school day in Jersey state schools? And if not, why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. All GCSE options differ year on year, depending on the pupil cohort, the staff that are available to teach them, and the decisions on GCSE options sit with individual schools because, as exam centres, because they know the best options for their schools. This is a flexible approach that pupils and schools and what it does, it gives pupils and schools the opportunity to match the curriculum offer to what's appropriate to their schools. There is no plans to centralise decision-making with regards to GCSE Portuguese.
Supplemental question, Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir. I'm not asking for centralisation of decision-making, sir. What I am asking for is, given the fact that surely there must be both a high actual demand and also a high latent demand for Portuguese as a GCSE, not by just those who already speak some Portuguese, but those who don't, would it not be preferable that such an important language for Jersey, and I hope the Minister recognises the importance of Portuguese, should actually be available as an option during the school day, rather than perpetuating this, what some would call a system of apartheid, where Portuguese speakers are forced to learn their own language after school, rather than it being an option alongside common languages like French and Spanish that are offered routinely in the school day as an option.
Thank you, sir. I would say to the Deputy, actually, one school, Hope Valley, does offer GCSE Portuguese during the school day. There are 2 others who offer GCSE Portuguese. I understand about the one in the GCSE after school. It's an option that is given. And there's no standard language that's offered in any school, sir. It often is matched to what is available to teach that language at GCSE level. I would support the teaching of GCSE Portuguese as an option. Anything beyond that, then we have to think about what other options are lost, sir. So that's what I would answer the Deputy on that one.
Very well. Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir. The Minister's referred to one of the factors being pupil demand. I know that my son, who's at a state school, had wanted to study German and was told that it didn't matter how many people in the school wanted to study German, that option was not going to be available. So I think that the system as it currently sits doesn't seem to have an overarching vision for the role of languages in the island, and also the response to Deputy Balash's proposition suggests the same. And I wonder whether the Minister could perhaps expand on his thoughts and give us a vision for the role that he sees foreign languages playing in the Jersey education system. And then we can perhaps put his attitude to Portuguese into that framework.
It's quite a wide range from the question, but there we go. I think it's wrong to say there's no vision for languages. I think it's just fundamentally wrong. Languages are delivered across schools. Many languages are delivered across many schools. I can't comment on what the Deputy's son was told at school. That it may well simply be a practical matter, and the practical matters in schools matter because you have to deliver, sir. And if there is nobody to teach German to GCSE, then it will be difficult for a school to deliver that. You can add that to physics teachers. You could add that to other teachers in the school. It's unfortunate, sir, but it's a reality of modern schooling. In terms of the vision of languages, of course they're important, sir, but so is the wider curriculum. We are trying to offer tailored curriculum to every child, particularly in state schools, so they can achieve what they want to achieve. Anything that is made compulsory in schools, sir, will remove something else. And that's the debate that perhaps we need to have. But that's where I stand, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Reynolds.
So I don't think compulsory has been mentioned at all, but I think the point I'm trying to get at is that we're a connected island, we're a multinational island, we're trying to make our way in the world, and a vision for how languages would fit into that might be something that would encourage provision, encourage teachers to come forward who might want to learn and add to the capacities within schools and so on. At the moment, it feels very much like we're stuck with what we've got, and there doesn't seem to be this strong, really strong, passionate desire to increase that language.
Deputy, firstly, that really is a speech and not a question. Secondly, it is rather straying outside the original question, and I allowed your first question as a supplementary, but we are talking about the teaching of Portuguese in secondary or in schools in Jersey. And I wonder if you could focus any supplementary question.
I'll ask the question, could the Minister consider at least the expansion of the provision of Portuguese, given the number of native speakers in the island who speak Portuguese, and see it in that wider context?
Thank you, sir. First of all, sir, I absolutely reject a narrative that's being created that language teachers in our schools are not committed and have a vision to language teaching, because they certainly do. And they work hard to deliver that every single day, every single week and every single month. They actually deliver it, sir. Yes, absolutely expand Portuguese provision. It happens with the Camios agreement between Portugal and Jersey, which we're about to renew, and negotiations around that and the way that will be delivered will be happening, sir. But there is, like it or not, there is a practicality in delivery. You have to have someone to deliver it. You have to have children who are interested in doing it, and you have to have the time and space within the school curriculum to do it. If we can magic up time, sir, that would be great. But that does not mean there is not a vision and support for languages in schools.
Final supplementary, Deputy Talley.
I feel like we're speaking at cross purposes, because this isn't about magicking up new time. This is about allocation of choice to our students in Jersey. And given the fact that Portuguese is a language which you can commonly speak and practice in Jersey, and given the fact that there are perhaps 10% of our population are Portuguese, and maybe, I don't know, 15 or so % of the school population already speak Portuguese. The simple question is, why is the example of Hope Valley, which has Portuguese in the curriculum, not being extended, or possibly, why wouldn't it be extended to the other 3 or 4 state schools that we have in Jersey?
Thank you, sir. So it will be extended. It would be extended if it was possible to deliver it within the curriculum time. But if we add something to the curriculum as an option, something else needs to be removed. So young people will be asked, do you want to learn Portuguese GCSE in school time, or do you want to learn one of the other subjects and cover them? When Hope Valley have been offering in year 9, it offers a GCSE, and then those young people can go and do an additional GCSE later on, which is beneficial to them. Other schools are offering GCSE Portuguese. I agree in terms of the time in which it's offered, but then other schools are offering other options outside the school timetable of other languages in order to extend the provision. I'm quite happy to look at the provision of languages, but it needs to be practical and real for schools. We can't just magic up staff. So we are looking at time, because if you put that into the standard timetable, you have to remove something else as an option for those children. That's the reality of the way schools work. I'm quite happy to take the deputy around some of our 11 to 16 schools to talk to head teachers and discuss that. That might be a way forward, sir.
Very well. We come on to question 9 that Deputy Gardiner will ask of the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy Gardiner.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what specific steps have been taken and processes put in place to implement the Assembly's adoption of Put in Jersey Businesses First, P56-2020, as amended?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for a question. So, P56 of 2020 was in 5 parts. Taking these in turn, parts A and B relate to giving weighting in procurement exercises in the context of recovery from COVID to the economic, social and environmental benefits to Jersey. For this aspect, social value has become more integrated into our procurement service and process, and 10% of the overall weighting within each set of tender evaluation criteria is now included as standard. There is also a dedicated resource to monitor, measure and develop best practice, engage with on-island suppliers and build a knowledge base and a commitments register which suppliers provide during competitive market activity. Part C relates to the publication of procurement policies and evaluation criteria. Whilst a specific report wasn't presented, the expenditure and procurement section of the Public Finances Manual, as well as more detailed procurement procedures, have been updated on a number of occasions. For example, a recent change formalised new procedures for engaging consultants, and the Public Finances Manual can be found on gov.je. Part D of the proposition relates to the publication of expenditure by the state's top 100 suppliers. 3 reports have been published, covering 2020, 2021 and 2022. Data for 2023 is currently being finalised and is expected to be published by the end of September. And so finally, Part E is a matter for the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Thank you.
Supplementary question.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the very detailed answer given by the Minister. I would bring the attention, my supplementary will be around Part A and Part B. Would the Minister advise how she reassured that the social value is working well for local, especially small businesses, and if Minister has any figures or evidence to indicate that it did have a positive impact for the local businesses?
Thank you, sir. As I say, the social value element is now weighted at 10% in our tender processes. I can give you, the only example I can give you in terms of how the social evaluation criteria works, within a tender over £100,000 is in our new office building. And in that case, the social value element has meant over £60,000 has been donated to local charities. 181 non-chargeable hours has been donated to community and charitable projects. 3 people have been employed through the Back to Work scheme. 7 prison leavers have been employed. 6 apprenticeships have been offered. 25 work placements given to local students. And then at the environmental level, it also involves a donation of £10,000 a year for 20 years to Highlands to ensure the continuing viability of construction courses, and 500 trees planted on Dandara development schemes, alongside a donation to Trees for Life and staff volunteering time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Minister for her answers, and also focusing on parts A and B. The Minister explained a little about the resources that should be available to help local businesses in applying to any tendering process. Could the Minister expand on what initiatives are in place to support especially small Jersey businesses in meeting these qualification standards for being in competitive nature within procurement processes?
I thank the Deputy. So various work is happening, and it's a very much an ongoing process. In the area of digital economy, work is continuing with SPPP to promote Jersey businesses. And that includes sharing early market pipelines with Jersey businesses to identify future areas of investment. We've worked with, another example, we've worked with family nursing and home care to ensure that high quality care is provided on island where appropriate. And Digital Jersey is in the process of developing a database to compile a record of on-island providers with capabilities to help match those with government opportunities. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, could the Minister advise if Jersey business offers such technical support to help especially small businesses take part in tender bids? And if not, why not?
Sir, Jersey business does not sit within my remit. I think that's a question for the Minister of Sustainable Economic Development. I don't know the answer to that. Thank you.
I have Deputy Doublé, Deputy Joseph, and then final supplementary. No other questions. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Has the Minister given any consideration to giving an extra weighting or extra points to local businesses during the procurement process, given they would be paying more taxes?
I'm not sure it's necessarily true that they will be paying more taxes. We do have our procurement policies and processes demonstrate positive steps taken to improve government's ability to put Jersey businesses first. We have to strike a careful balance between wishing to appoint Jersey suppliers while remaining compliant with obligations internationally to maintain a reputation as an open and liberal trading nation. Commercial services, however, continues to improve and enhance data-led decision-making and understanding of on-island capabilities and opportunities to engage with local suppliers.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Is there anything built into the procurement system to enable some reflection on the impact for the providers who were chosen and indeed the impact on providers who aren't chosen?
Sir, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think I don't quite understand the question. If we're suggesting that we have to consider the impact on somebody who's successful and the impact on someone who's not successful, I'm not quite sure that's government's role. What I can tell you is that the reporting from, I think, the top 100 suppliers shows us that over 57% of our spend is within Jersey suppliers, some 42% is with UK suppliers, and the very small balance remaining is with other jurisdictions, including Guernsey.
Very well. Deputy Joseph.
So I had intended to ask the Minister about the adherence to modern slavery provisions within these, but actually, as the Minister went on to explain to the Assembly in some detail the benefits of the state's building, would the Minister, having set out such a fulsome list of advantages to the community, including charitable donations being baked in over a number of years, etc., would she actually agree to publish the value to the contract of those matters, because they haven't come at zero cost? And would she confirm, or otherwise, whether or not those costs are now capitalised in the asset price which this Assembly will be considering when the Social Security Minister has to ask the Assembly for the purchase of that building with those capitalised costs built in. So it's quite an important principle, sir. The Minister was advancing something which I think is actually at taxpayers' cost.
Firstly, just to cover, Deputy Joseph mentioned modern slavery. I don't believe we have legislation on modern slavery in Jersey as yet that we have to consider. I believe the Minister for Home Affairs is considering that. I can't answer that question. Do we want to engage local suppliers or not? There will be a price to engaging local suppliers, and I can't answer that question. I don't know if it comes at a cost, but it is part of the weighting towards the. It is part of the weighting in that we apply in selecting a contract provider, the social value element. Of course, I imagine there will be a cost to it, and we either take a local supplier with their social value, or we take a foreign supplier with their local value. I don't know if that question can be answered. I don't know if that information can be provided, but I will consult with the team because I simply don't know. I don't know if it's feasible to deliver it, and I don't know if it's commercially viable to deliver it. I don't know.
Well, I maybe seek a meeting with the Minister, because she mentioned that there was a payment of, I think it was £10,000 a year baked into future rental provisions. Now that comes effectively, there's an annual cost that is baked into the rent that therefore will form part of the consideration for the purchase of it. And that's a pretty easy mathematical question to make. So it's important that we're clear that benefits are not being being paid for by the developer; they're actually being passed to taxpayers because we're having to buy it. And my question is on that specific issue: does she appreciate that?
Sir, I don't believe I did say that there was a sum allocated towards rent. I said that the developer would be making a donation of £10,000 a year to Highlands to ensure viability of construction courses. That is important. As he will know from the budget, we are hoping to buy the house, so to buy the property, so rent will not be an issue in future. Thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. There were several things mentioned, but SPC, Public Accounts Committee, conducting a procurement review. They recently published submissions from the Institute of Directors, Construction Council, and Chamber of Commerce have the similar theme. The direct quote: "The general consensus is the government of Jersey procurement is broken, serving to act as a barrier to businesses being done, rather than something that enables local businesses to provide valuable goods and services to our government and ultimately local taxpayer." Was the minister aware about the sentiment around within the local Jersey businesses, and if the current procurement policy was a paper exercise to satisfy the Assembly P56 2020, and would she be thinking to review the policy or to engage with local businesses?
So no, I wasn't aware of that feedback. We have done considerable work, which is outside the scope of this question, to continue to improve our procurement processes. P56 was about trying to ensure that Jersey businesses were able to tender. All Jersey businesses can tender. Any opportunity over £100,000 must be advertised on the government's tender portal. Any Jersey business can tender for that. That we have open processes, and I'm slightly confused as to, do we want to support Jersey businesses or do we not? We are trying to do that, but equally we were asked by P56 to ensure social value, and we are trying to ensure social value as well as agreeing, as well as trying to facilitate tendering by Jersey businesses. P20 was also done, as I said, in the context of COVID. There's considerable work going on to ensure our procurement processes, but sir, I do feel that is outside the scope of this question, which was specifically about P56. Thank you.
Well, we come to question 10. The Connétable St Martin will ask the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs. Connétable.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether the Government has capacity to develop a statutory spiking offence within its ongoing work, responding to the recommendations of the Task Force on Violence Against Women and Girls report?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Constable Connétable for the question. Spiking is a serious and concerning phenomenon which will not be tolerated. I am reassured that existing legislation designed to address spiking is fit for purpose, and as such there is no need to develop a new offence to address this behaviour. Spiking for the purpose of carrying out some kind of sexual assault is under the Sexual Offences Law with a 10-year penalty. Spiking for any reason is a form of assault, and where it is done to facilitate another offence, such as theft, I understand it would be a serious aggravating factor. Where spiking is done with an illegal drug, possession of that drug in itself would be an offence. There is currently no capacity to develop additional legislation to address spiking within the ongoing work to implement the recommendations of the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force. The government's legislative programme in this area of the violence against women and girls has been defined by the recommendations of the task force, which made recommendations to strengthen legislation around domestic violence, online abuse, stalking and sexual harassment. The task force did not make any recommendations for additional legislation to address spiking. The task force recommendations in relation to legislative development were informed by a legislative mapping exercise undertaken by the Law Officers Department. This exercise considered a number of behaviours that relate to violence against women and girls, including drink spiking. This mapping exercise identified a number of gaps in legislation. However, the need to develop additional legislation to address spiking was not identified.
Supplemental question, Connétable.
Thank you, sir. The UK government confirmed its plans within the King's Speech to introduce a new law to make spiking a specific criminal offence in the UK. And I believe that Jersey should be proactive in this rather than reactive. So would the Minister be able to confirm what sort of resources would be needed for such an offence to be developed? And could she see that such an offence, if it's not being developed now, can she see that in the next few years there would be resources made available for a specific law and follow with the UK's lead?
Thank you, sir. The Connotab is correct in that the new Labour government in the UK has put this on their political agenda to look at in relation to a specific offence. The previous government actually had also got it on their agenda, but it was removed by a member of the previous government as they did not necessarily think it was necessary. However, also the government is looking at, the UK government is looking at that piece of legislation as a specific legislation, but they're also looking at what other things may or may not need to be done. In relation to what the Connotab asks, my delivery plan is up to and including, obviously, to the middle of 2026, and there is a strict, very tight plan. At this time, sir, as I said, it would be detrimental to be considering doing this as a separate offence from the point of view I'm concerned of what other things may have to be dropped, but it's not off the agenda if things move forward.
Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister agree that whilst legislation is there to punish offences made, it's also there to shape behaviour, and that having a specific offence in this area would send a strong message to any potential perpetrators that this behaviour will not be condoned?
I fully see what the Deputy is saying, and I would not disagree. But obviously, as a government, we have to look at what we are trying to achieve, and we are trying to put in place all of the other offences which were identified in the task force. This is not only about legislation, but it is about education as well. And as I think it is necessary, as I said, the task force findings didn't, in all of their work, didn't find this one of their largest concerns. However, what it does say was that there was an indicator from those who provided information that there was concern, or there was a thought that they could potentially be spiked. So what I would like to see is actually more work, sir, done in relation to education and looking at how we can develop this forward, because it isn't only about violence against women and girls in relation to spiking, it is about all our population, sir. And I would like to make one point here. We are 49 states members who all attend our parish assemblies. Within that parish assembly, there will be licensing requests. As states members, we can ask questions, and we can ask questions of those people who have licensed premises, and we can ask them if they are educating their staff in relation to the matters of spiking. And I will leave them with that thought, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. The Minister mentioned education. What conversations or work is she doing with the Education Minister to increase education available in schools and indeed lifelong learning for our population in this area?
I thank the Deputy for that question. Sir, the new school programme started following the reintroduction of building a safer community. And I think within those programmes that they will be doing, there's inputs from police, fire, ambulance, etc., and the schools. And that will be something that I am sure that the coordinator of that programme will ensure is within that, because I'm fully aware, certainly from the ambulance services, is that they provide information for young people about how they deal with a friend who may be in difficulties. And this is primarily what we need to look at is the fact that if somebody has been spiked, we need to take action, and we need to take it quickly. We need to report it to the police and all the necessary evidence gathered in order that we can actually successfully do something about it. As I said, because that's one of the biggest things that needs to happen, sir, because it is very difficult, sir, to be able to identify an offender in relation to this type of offence. So I think the quicker that we can actually do that and the matters are reported, the better. Thank you.
Final supplementary, Conor Simon.
I thank the Minister for her answers, and I don't have any.
Very much. Come to question 11, that Deputy Andrews will ask the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise how many dogs have been destroyed by order of the court since 2018 as a result of attacks by them on other animals and members of the public?
Minister.
I thank the Deputy for the question. Obviously, sir, I'm answering this question, although I do not actually have responsibility for the management of the courts. The magistrate is able to make a destruction order under Article 11B of the Dogs Jersey Law 1961. There is a right of appeal against such an order to the Royal Court. There are no records of any destruction orders having been made since 2023. Prior data to 2023 was not available in the time frame for answering of this question. The judgment in any appeal that is heard in the Royal Court against the decision of the magistrate to order the destruction of a dog would be published on the Jersey Legal Information Board website. A perusal of that website shows that in 2021, a destruction order against a dog in 2020 was successfully appealed. No other appeals against destruction orders between 2018 and the present day were identified.
Supplemental question, Deputy Andrews. Very well, we come to question 12. The Deputy will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to his letter dated the 29th of August 2024 to the Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, advising that work on the north of St Helier Primary School has been delayed to 2027, will the Minister advise whether there is any intention to use the former Jersey Gas site for community activities prior to the works on the new school commencing, and if not, why not?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for his question. Sir, I expect the Deputy is aware the site is not currently in government ownership, and therefore any use, community or otherwise, would need to be negotiated with the site owner. The government's interest is in acquiring the site for a new primary school, and any use of the site prior to that point is currently not a matter within our control. So our focus is on properties that we currently own, and I'm working with the Minister of Education to get better utilisation of school estate out of hours, and I'm pleased to report that we're making progress in that area. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, sir. So to continue on that theme, so given the proposed £2.1 million budget cut in his department's rolling vote, and in the spirit of trying to find further savings, has the Minister considered the repurposing of the existing Gas Place showroom into a youth facility upon vacation by Rock? Would he be willing to support such a use, something his Assistant Minister, the Constable of St Helier, has been championing?
Sir, the priority for this government, sir, is to find a permanent home for St Helier Youth Centre in the north of town, sir. I think that with the amount of development in that area, the Council and Ministers as a whole have come to that conclusion, sir, and we are refocusing our efforts to deliver that. We've identified a site and we hope to progress as soon as we possibly can. Thank you, sir.
Very well. We come now on to question 13, but before we do so, I'm afraid, Deputy Joseph.
I was put my light on, sir, to admit to an inadvertent ping. I'm sorry, but also I was going to ask the Minister for supplementary, but you didn't get me, so that's fine.
No, sorry. Well, I assumed that you were going to make the usual £10 contribution to the charity fund, sir, notwithstanding the musical nature of your interjection. Very well, we come to question 13, that Deputy Renniff will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy.
Minister for the Environment. Oh, is it Minister?
No, I think it's misstated on the...
Will the Minister explain what work, if any, is being undertaken to ensure the toilets that are part of the former nude food development at the Pullant are kept open to the public?
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for his question. So I'm told that the toilets at the former nude food site have been opened sporadically over the course of this summer. I understand the company which owns the former Nude Dunes restaurant at the Pullant has gone into liquidation, and that the handling of claims against the company is with a liquidator. Under instruction from Jersey Property Holdings, litigation has commenced against the company for failure to operate the toilets for regular use by the general public. The liquidator has informed Property Holdings that the company has no funds with which to open and operate the toilets, and officers are meeting on the 19th September to discuss the matter. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, sir. If I hear correctly, the Minister said that the owner had said there was no funds to open the toilets. My understanding is that during the recent filming of Bergerac, the toilets were opened for the purposes of the use of extras and so on. So clearly it is possible to open them. The planning condition stated that they should be open to all members of the public between the hours of 0900 and 2100 during BST and 0900 and 1700 during GMT in a manner fit for purpose and maintained in perpetuity. Can you confirm, therefore, that that planning obligation, which normally falls on the Environment Minister, has been taken over and is being enforced by Jersey Property Holdings?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I understood that the toilets had been opened sporadically. I couldn't confirm if they were. They weren't open for Bergerac. I understand that question was asked on social media last night and got mixed responses. So, the Property Holdings Department, sir, are working on this. As the Deputy rightfully says, the terms of the use of that site includes in perpetuity toilets to be open to the public during the hours that the Deputy mentions. It's a legal obligation and we are pursuing that, sir. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister explore the possibility of allowing the previous very popular refreshment kiosk to begin operating again until owners find a new buyer and are ready to trade? Any agreement could include maintaining and monitoring the toilet facilities?
So it's not something I've considered, sir, but I'm happy to take that away and give that further consideration. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Miles. I have Deputy Taddy, Deputy Oza for then the final supplementary. Deputy Taddy.
The Minister talked about the owners not having any money to keep the toilets open, but can he clarify how much money it costs to unlock a door?
Sir, I dare say that depends on who's unlocking the door, sir. I dare say my rates would be cheaper than yours, sir. Sir, opening a toilet is not just about unlocking a door, sir. If you open public toilets, you've got to maintain them, sir. You've got to ensure that they're clean. You've got to ensure that they've got appropriate consumables there as well, sir. Thank you.
Supplementary, Deputy Taddy.
Can the Minister give us any indication about what he means when he says litigation has been started against the owners for not keeping the toilets open? When can we expect to see this litigation come to fruition, and what form will it take?
So I'm not aware of the full details, sir. What I am aware of is that there's a meeting scheduled for next week, sir, and hopefully I'll be able to update members following that meeting. Thank you, sir.
So, in following on from that, I think is the Minister aware whether or not he is dealing with what is called a planning obligation, which would be a matter that is a legal requirement as part of a planning consent, which the questioner asked. And if so, if it is a planning obligation, it's enforceable against that entity, and it is the planning authority that must enforce it. So perhaps it's his colleague, the Minister of Environment, that may well be able to assist in getting these toilets open and the enforcement made.
Sir, I've not seen the contract, sir, but I understand it was part of the contract of sale, sir, which required the same requirements as the planning obligation. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Oza.
But just to confirm then, it was actually contemporaneous. It was the planning obligation that came first, but it is a planning obligation, so it's enforceable. But he'll advise, sir.
So I'd need to go away and come back and advise the Deputy, sir. Thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Renner. Before we come to question 14, the Deputy Wilson will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister explain what impact, if any, the reprofiling of the development of the Liskeard Youth Centre in the proposed budget, Government Plan 25-28, to allow a new youth facility in St Helier will have on the new youth centre planned for in St Clement?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. So, there is a need to reprofile the capital programme to ensure that it is both realistic and deliverable. As part of this work, improvements to the Liscay Youth Centre have been scheduled for 2028. It is important to highlight, sir, that the current services delivered from the centre will continue and there will be no change in the youth work delivery. As I mentioned in the previous answer, sir, a new town youth centre is required in the first instance to ensure that children and young people in the town area can benefit from the same level of provision to that which is available to young people in other parts of the island, including at Liscay. The decision was taken with the full support of the youth service and SIPES. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. The consultation with the youth service is fine, but what consultation took place with young people in the area? And what was the feedback regarding their decision? And can the Minister explain to us why we have now got one parish pitched against the other in terms of its development around youth services?
Sir, I'm not aware of the consultation that took place, whether the youth service consulted with their members or with the wider community, sir. Sir, all our services and facilities are important for young islanders, sir. We have areas where there are facilities and there are areas where there are none, sir. Many of us here will be able to remember and name many youth clubs that used to be in the St Helier area, such as Aquila, Seaton, so on and so forth, which are no longer there, sir. We need to provide services in St Helier, sir, and the decision has been made to make that a priority. Thank you.
Deputy Joseph.
I wonder whether or not the Minister would advise whether or not he consulted his fellow connétables on the allocation and the importance of St Helier. He is both a Minister and a member of the Committee de Connétable, and as the questioner rightly says, there is an understanding the importance of St Helier. Of course, there are voices for all parishes, of which St Saviour and St Clement are, of course, voices on the Committee de Connétable. Did they have a chance to have their say?
Sir, the discussion around the priorities of the government plan, sir, was made by the government and the Council of Ministers, sir. Took long and hard discussions and debates about this, sir. So we've heard from a previous question about the need for facilities in St Helier, where there are no facilities, sir. We have got facilities in St Clement's and in St Saviour, and we're looking to further increase the provision of those facilities, utilising the school estate which is available to us. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, it was quite a simple question. Did he discuss it with the Committee of Connétable? I know it's in a government, but he's a minister and a government, and there's a member of the Committee de Connétable on the Council of Ministers. Was it discussed by the committee?
I inferred from the answer that all of the decision was made around the Council of Ministers table, but...
I meant consultation, sir.
Sir, infrastructure provides the services, sir. I did not discuss it with my fellow connétables at the Committee de Connétable, sir. If my fellow connétable would like to put it on the agenda, I'm more than happy to discuss it with them at that arena. Thank you, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Wilson. Very well, we come to question 15. The Deputy Doublé will ask of the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide an update on his work progressing the improvement of women's health services, including termination of pregnancy?
Minister.
Sir, I wonder if the Deputy would be minded to allow me to pass that over to my Assistant Minister, Deputy Howard.
Yes, very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to Deputy Doublé for her question. We have an action plan, sir, for progressing improvements to women's health services that I will be sharing with the Women's Health Political Advisory Group later this month, and then with scrutiny. New criteria for access for funded IVF services have recently been published, and I would like to thank everyone who helped to shape these criteria, especially Deputy Stevenson, for bringing the initial proposal to the Assembly. But these criteria will only come into effect from the 1st of January if the Assembly approves the necessary funding for the government plan, and I'd urge them to do so, sir. The recent refurbished maternity unit is now open, which includes a dedicated midwifery-led unit. There is also a counsellor, mental health specialist nurse, and a breastfeeding specialist. We are listening to feedback from Jersey Maternity Voices, a group of service users who provide continual service improvement feedback. The findings of the recent survey on contraception services will be published later this month, and the findings of the Women and Girls Health and Wellbeing Survey will be available as part of the Jersey Strategic Needs Assessment in Q4 2024. We continue to progress plans to provide an opt-out breast screening service as opposed to an opt-in screening programme by early 2025. This will ensure that every woman is automatically invited to a screening appointment at the right time. With regard to the termination of pregnancy, there is an active review of fees underway. With the Minister's support, I have determined that terminations should be free of charge for those under 18s, full-time students under 21.
Mr. Minister, I'm sorry, you're well over the time normally allocated for a ministerial answer. Can you bring your answer to a swift
So
conclusion?
we have other things that we're doing to improve women's health. Especially we're going to try to get the gynecological wards up and running again. Thank you. But I will carry on and let everybody know. Thank you, sir.
Indeed. Just as a reminder, ministerial answers should be no longer than, any answers should be no longer than 1 minute and 30 seconds. Sometimes people stray over that, and there's an element of leeway afforded by the chair, but there has to be a limit.
I apologise, sir.
No, not at all. It's an ongoing learning process. Yes, a supplemental question.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Assistant Minister for her answer. In a letter to my scrutiny panel in July, the Minister stated that he was unable to commit to deliver wholesale legislation change in the area of termination of pregnancy due to limited resources. Could the Assistant Minister explain where the resources that were previously allocated to this work have been reallocated to?
Mr. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, the Deputy, for her question. I'm very sorry, I can't say exactly where the resources have gone, but we are continuing to make improvements to women's health. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. On the 21st of June, the Health Minister was quoted in the media as saying he was trying to get resources to get the full review and update on the termination of pregnancy law back on track. Yet recent communications with scrutiny show that this hasn't been achieved. Can the Assistant Minister detail what steps were taken to try to secure resources and why it hasn't been possible?
Thank you, sir. We're trying to do our best with the resources we have, and we just have to prioritise what we can. Thank you very much.
Supplemental question.
I'm not sure that answered the question. So, what steps were taken to try to secure resources?
Discussions are ongoing, sir.
Can I?
You can ask a supplementary question.
Thank you,
yes,
sir.
indeed.
What resources would be needed to get the update, the work back on track, please?
I think we would need a greater amount of money in the budget, sir. Thank you.
Well, have Deputy Taddier, then final supplementary. Deputy Taddier.
Thank you, sir. What risks were identified by not bringing forward the new law as previously planned? And what mitigation, if any, has been made to deal with those risks?
We were not able to do that, sir, and we are prioritising what we can with funds and resources available. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Taddier.
Yeah, what does the Assistant Minister mean they weren't able to identify the risks of not bringing forward this legislation?
We prioritised, Deputy Taddier.
Through the chair.
Thank you, sir. We prioritised what we absolutely needed to do, which is it included the fact that, should I read it to you? That we're drafting instructions to allow all women in Jersey to have access to termination jersey as opposed to just those who are ordinarily resident or resident for 90 days, and that will be issued imminently. Thank you, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Could the Assistant Minister commit to ensuring that information relating to this area will be prepared in advance of our next scrutiny hearing so that the questions can be answered fully, including how much money and resources would be required to fulfil the requirements of this policy area?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We come now to question 16. The Deputy Andrews will ask of the Chair of the State's Employment Board. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chair advise how many positions across the public sector have been subject to redundancy since the current Council of Ministers took office this year?
So the Vice Chair of the State's Employment Board will take the question if that's acceptable.
Yes.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question. As of the 31st of August 2024, 8 positions have been made redundant across the public sector, with a saving of £552,000 per annum, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Indeed, sir. Thank you. Can the Vice Chair confirm whether more redundancies will happen before the end of this year?
Yes, sir. This is an ongoing process, and part of the savings in payroll is to seek out further redundancies within the public sector of grade 11 and above, sir.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. During that time period, how many redundancies have been made in the Communications Department and how many members of staff from that department are being redeployed to other areas? Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the Deputy for the question. The savings or in payroll are coming from across departments, but so far the ones that have been identified are through the Office of the Chief Executive and through the Chief Operating Office. So the savings in payroll from the Communications Department, first of all, we are seeking redeployment, and then further to that, we will be looking at redundancies on a voluntary basis, and that is the first plan of attack, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you. So just to confirm, there's so far been no redundancies from the Communications Department?
That's correct, sir.
Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister tell us, could the Chair of the Vice Chair tell us whether there is a target for the number of people who will be let go, and if so, and whether the target is being, if there is a target, whether it's being met by asking people to go or targeting particular roles which it is desired to close?
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question. The target is not on specific numbers of individuals. The target is on savings. So the £15 million savings as identified in the Common Strategic Policy is what we're aiming for, and the number of individuals that fit within those £15 million payroll savings is where we will end up. Can the Deputy just remind me of the second part of his question, sir?
Whether there are specific roles being targeted for closures or whether they are simply a general invitation for people to apply to redundancy.
Yes, thank you. No, not specific roles, but the savings are targeted at grade 11 and above. So it will be the upper tiers of management, so that we'll end up with a flatter management structure throughout the organisation, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Yes, sir. Does the Minister, does the Vice Chair not agree that there is a risk that simply relying on volunteers means that key skills and key experiences and capacity will be lost? For example, somebody may volunteer for redundancy in an area where that job is very much required, but it is possible to let them go because that meets the target. What is he doing to ensure that vital capacity is not lost and that the people who leave, the decisions over people who leave are aligned with priorities of the government?
Yes, sir. Obviously, a lot of work is going on in that area. So where someone does decide to leave, we will seek to redeploy from within existing resources to fill those positions. We also, of course, have a recruitment freeze for a period of 9 months to ensure that we don't take on any more staff whilst we're trying to rearrange the current staff that we have. So I don't believe that that's a risk, sir, but the mitigations that we have in place should make sure that that isn't really a risk. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Taddy, Deputy Gardner, and then final supplementary. I'm not taking further questions on this particular one. Deputy Taddy.
Thank you, sir. The Assistant Minister talked about the savings that are being made, but what have the costs of the redundancies to date been? For example, what, in terms of payoffs that might need to have been made to staff in order to get them to leave this year?
Thank you, sir, and thank the Deputy for the question. So, yes, obviously we have contractual obligations when staff leave their posts, and it's down to their grade and perhaps their length of service. So the payments, of course, there is a cost when staff are let go, whether that's compulsory or voluntary, and the payments that have been made thus far range from £9,000 to £115,000, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Taddy.
It would be good to know what the total savings are. I mean, that doesn't really give us. He's given us the savings that are being made, but not the costs. So what's the sum of those costs?
Yes, the total costs, obviously, without one of the risks here is I don't want to comment on individual employees. It would be best.
I don't want to hear about that either.
Sorry, I missed.
I'm sorry. Please let's not interrupt the speaker when they're speaking. So please carry on.
Yeah. So all I have at the moment, sir, is the range from and to on those redundancy payments, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
So can I ask for clarification? I asked a straightforward question, and does the Minister not have that information? I don't. Of the total.
Are you able to give the total to the?
Sorry, sir. Just to clarify, the total of all the redundancy payments thus far on those posts is 330,000, sir.
Thank you.
Very well. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. We are here at the Assembly again and again. There is no capacity within the system to develop policy, especially within the policy teams. Can the Vice Chair of SAB reassure that redundancies will not affect ability of the government develop policies and not affect policy development team?
Yes, obviously part of the exemptions from these savings are essential and frontline services. So policy would be regarded, certain parts of policy would be regarded as essential service for delivering the government's priorities, sir.
Thank you for the answer. Certain of all, I'm not sure. Would they also reassure that employees who took a redundancy will not come back as a standalone consultants, as we had previously cases, because we would not have capacity and knowledge within the system, and we require consultancy services?
Yes, I thank the Deputy for that additional question. Obviously, as part of this plan, as I mentioned earlier, is the freeze on recruitment. So anyone who's let go for whatever reason would not then be subsequently re-employed because there is currently a recruitment freeze, sir.
Very well. Final supplementary.
So I didn't ask about re-employment, so I have to engage as an external consultant.
That certainly wouldn't be the objective or the plan when someone is let go on that basis, sir.
Very well. Final supplementary, Deputy.
No, sir.
Very much. We then come to question 17. The Deputy Renner will ask the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to his recent speech at the Our Health in Our Hands conference, will the Minister update the Assembly on his planned restructure of the Health and Community Services Department?
Sir, earlier in the summer, I was invited to share my initial thoughts on the health service and articulate any views I had on how matters might be improved. I expressed my views accordingly and took the opportunity to share the transcript of what I said by email to all States members. Since then, in conjunction with my assistant ministers and the lead policy officer, we've been in the process of refining our ideas, and recently we started to consult with more senior leaders in HCS, and going forward we'll be consulting with the wider health service. So once we're sure the ideas are workable and likely to deliver a more coherent service, we look to present them to the Council of Ministers, scrutiny and the wider Assembly before making them public. Just to put everyone's mind at rest, especially the large number of people working within HCS, the essential principles of the work don't vary much from what was said at the earlier conference, and it centres mainly on creating a more inclusive and autonomous service, improving interaction with primary care, the charitable sector and public health. The overall goal being to create a more seamless, efficient, interconnected and perhaps quite importantly so, a more contented service. I hope that helps to answer the Deputy's question, sir.
Supplemental question.
Yes, sir. Could the Minister offer assurance that he will undertake full consultation on these proposals at the appropriate time? And could he also give a commitment that they will be the subject of a vote in the Assembly also at the appropriate time?
The first part of that question, sir, I thought I'd alluded to the fact that we've already started a consultation process. And secondly, whether it requires to come to the Assembly is yet to be defined. So it will depend entirely on the extent of any changes that are proposed. But fairly obviously, sir, if those proposals require coming to the Assembly, then of course they will. Thank you.
Well, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister advise what the timescale for proposed restructure?
I don't have a proposed timescale, sir, because this is work that's ongoing with other work, but we're proceeding as quickly as we can because we'd like to get everything, if we can, organised, done and possibly in place within this Parliament. So we're just moving as quickly as we can.
Supplemental question,
Yes, of course. Thank you. We know that the turnaround team contracts will expire by the end of this year, and we know that the contract for the current HCS chief officer will expire shortly as well, within I think 6 months. Would the consultation be ready before, and if recruitment process will take place?
A little bit of a difficult one, sir. All of those posts are currently under discussion, and I think we're quite close to resolving them. But we need to be absolutely certain before we make any announcements. But they are being considered and dealt with at the moment, sir.
Deputy Stevenson. I should say I have Deputy Stevenson, Deputy Jeune, and the final supplementary. No further questions.
Thank you. What steps is the Minister taking to ensure that he takes people, and that's staff, the public and this Assembly with him on this journey so that all the hard work is not wasted come the next election?
I don't think I can say anything more, sir, other than the fact that we've started a consultation process. We're going to be as thorough as we can, and it's pointless trying to impose things on people that aren't going to work or that aren't going to be acceptable. So we'll just work as hard as we can to make sure we do the job as well as we can, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you. And what does the Minister believe is a realistic aim for him to have achieved on this matter by the end of this political term?
I think I'll refer to the comments I made earlier. So we're looking, the overall goal, as I said, is to create a more seamless, efficient, interconnected and more contented service. So those are our goals, sir.
Deputy Jeune.
Thank you, sir. And within this restructuring, alongside that, I believe the Minister in the past has promised a new strategy for health in the island. Where is it, and who is involved in the design, and how does that interrelate with the restructuring and your vision that you have just outlined, what you would like to see in health?
So the development of a strategy is very much in its early stages. Unless you get the structure of something right, it'd be a little bit like arranging the deck chairs on the deck when you haven't fixed the hole at the bottom of the boat. So a strategy will emerge, but part of that strategy is actually designing a more inclusive and more cohesive service in the first instance. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Jeune.
Thank you, sir. I'm not sure if I would see this the same way. A strategy would be about what you'd like the health service to deliver, and then you would restructure according to what you'd like to deliver, which would be outlined in the strategy. So I'd like just to confirm with the Minister if there at least is some clear points that would come out before the restructuring, so we know islanders and the Assembly would know what kind of key areas the Health Minister would like to focus on in his restructuring.
I think this one's quite simple. We have obviously a different way of working. That wouldn't be my approach. I've stated what my approach is. It's basically to restructure in the first instance, and the strategy will evolve from there, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir, just perhaps a couple of clarifications. The last major reorganisation of the restructuring, rather, of the health service was P19-2023, which was subject to a vote. The Minister availed himself of the opportunity to vote against it. So would he commit to a vote on a subsequent restructuring, which seems to be implied by this? And could he clarify what will happen to the chief officer role, to the recruitment of the new chief officer, if they are being recruited into a role that will fundamentally change should the restructuring go ahead?
Sorry, sir, could I just ask the Deputy to repeat the first part of that question to make sure I've got it clear? Sorry to ask.
The previous restructuring was P19-2023, which was brought to the Assembly, so would he commit to bring a similar restructuring to the Assembly?
So I'll repeat what I said earlier. If the proposed restructuring is substantive and requires to come back to the Assembly, then of course it will. If there are only minor changes that don't require to come back, then they won't.
So the second part of the question was the role of the chief officer, which might be changed quite dramatically after they're reappointed in the new year. And so what contingencies or what does he have to comment about that potential situation?
We're not quite at the point where we know whether that restructuring will involve one or two roles, and I don't want to go into anything further than that at this stage. But as I said in answer to Deputy Gardner's question, those things are currently under review. They're sort of imminent. Decisions are imminent, but not yet made. So.
Very well. We come to question 18. The Deputy Coles will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide an update on the bus operators contract and advise when both the re-tender process is likely to be complete and confirmation of the successful operator will be given to the Assembly?
Thank you, sir. Seems like tenders are like buses this morning. Sir, the position remains that the bus operator contract is being tendered in accordance with the Public Finances Manual. The tender process is running to schedule and there's been a good level of interest shown. The appointment of an operator is expected to take place later this autumn, at which point an announcement will be made. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental.
Yes, sir. The term later this autumn, can the Minister be a little bit more specific?
Sir, I've not been involved in the process, sir. Quite rightly so. It's been officers that have been doing the work, sir. So I'd expect to be briefed towards the end of this month or early next month, so I wouldn't expect a decision to be made after October. I'd like to think it will be sooner rather than later. Thank you.
We come to question 19 that Deputy Gardner will ask the Chief Minister. Deputy.
Thank you. Will the Chief Minister detail the progress, if any, which has been made in 2024 to develop an internal government digital strategy?
Thank you, sir. Following a number of operational IT incidents in January and February, the Chief Information Officer led a review of the underlying infrastructure supporting the government's digital services, which has been used to create a plan to support further investment in the digital infrastructure, to support digital systems. A strategy was commenced under Deputy Kirsten in the previous government, and plan revisions to the draft digital strategy will lay out how a major focus of the digital services function will be on remediating and upgrading the IT infrastructure to provide a solid foundation upon which further digitisation can occur. So 3 immediate actions are improving the reliability of frontline digital services, prioritising projects and programmes for delivery as soon as possible, and simplifying digital systems. And that's aimed at reducing risk to the provision of digital services by upgrading, enhancing the highest risk applications. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you for the Chief Minister for assuring that the work is continued. Would the Chief Minister advise if the digital ID to digitalise Jersey has been considered, and if it's anywhere in the plans to introduce one digital ID that we did have to integrate our governance system?
So I'd have to double check, and I'll do that and come back to the Deputy if I may. Thank you.
Very well, we come on to the next question that Deputy Wilson will ask the Chief Minister. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I do believe a large proportion of my question has already been answered by the previous question on this issue, but I did have a supplementary, if you'd allow me to ask that supplementary in relation to this question.
Well, I'm sorry, we've moved on to that question. You can ask it or you can withdraw it, but you can't really ask a supplementary of a question you haven't asked.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll agree to withdraw it, sir, and I'll speak to the Chief Minister separately. Thank you.
Oh, I was hoping the Deputy would ask it, but because we could clarify any points that might be lying over from the previous questions.
The Deputy has withdrawn it, and that's the... and of course, Chief Minister, you do have question time coming up as well, so that can be dealt with there, I'm sure. Very well, we come to the final question, question 21, that Deputy Tadier will ask the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what importance, if any, is placed on a student's ability to access provision of learning in their home language whilst at school in Jersey, and what plans, if any, exist to improve this access?
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for the question. So a high importance is placed on access to home languages learning for pupils in Jersey schools. The Language Policy for Education 2022, which is under a scheduled review after its first 2 years, will continue to reflect the high priority and importance that is placed on learners' access to provision in their home language whilst at school in Jersey. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. It's news to me that the current language policy is under review. Could the Minister give some more information about why it's being reviewed, what is being reviewed, and who is leading on that review? Is it somebody who's already in-house, or is somebody being brought in to do that review?
Thank you, sir. They are scheduled to review every 2 years, and we would want to look at the multi-language learner policy. Of course, because there is a context in how we deal with this, depending on the demands made elsewhere regards languages, and as we are currently in a context of a lot of demands being made on languages in schools with different propositions and different things coming forward, we have to look at the way in which we can also allow multi-language learners to access. So currently, there are 84 countries of birth listed in 2021 in our schools. One of our primary schools has 38 first languages other than English, and they are demands being made in our schools that are being dealt with as best they possibly can. So now is a really good time to lead that review, and it would be led by the person who leads language learning. I believe the person who was doing that has been seconded to something else, but it may be time to return to that focus in modern languages, sir. Thank you.
Right. Very well, that brings questions to an end. Now, I don't know if people are leaping in because they want to ask a question of the Minister, or they're leaping in to be first in for the first period of questions without notice. I brought questions to an end. I think questions are at an end, and we are moving now to the next period of questions. Very well.
So can I just... sorry, sir, can I test that? I'm obviously not in the Assembly, but were there other people who wanted to ask supplementaries on that? I think we've still got time.
I left I work on the assumption if no one has lit up my screen, to use the perhaps unfortunate expression, and I haven't seen a light on at the time when the question is last answered, I assume no one wishes to ask a question, and as soon as I say questions are over, that was it, and there was no one asking at that point.
Thank you, sir.
If that assists you. Very well, we come to the period of questions without notice. The First Minister is the Minister for Sustainable and Economic Development. Before I call upon the Minister, can I just write a few names down here to make sure that I've not forgotten people? Right, I've noted Connie Harbison-Saviour, Deputies I.A. Coles and Renouf, Deputy Alex Curtis, and Deputy Stevenson, Coles, Stevenson, Gardner and Tadier. So let's see where we get to. Minister. So the first question is the Connie Harbison-Saviour.
Thank you, sir. Further to a question this morning by Deputy Miles regarding banking, is the Minister aware that St Saviour's just lost its final bank? In recent times, we've lost Milady Farm, Lloyds Bank, Five Oaks, and now HSB Five Oaks has closed, leaving St Saviour without a bank. As the island seems to be moving towards a cashless society, many shops in town, including coffee bars, are card only, that this will put people without a bank account at a severe disadvantage. Does the Minister not agree?
Thank you, sir. There was so much in that question. If I was to say I agree or disagree, I'd be agreeing or disagreeing to an enormous amount. So rather than saying whether I agree or disagree to various things, I absolutely recognise the Conotab's concern and also agree with that concern. Although I also accept that this question may be better put to the Financial Services Minister than myself, as I don't have responsibility for banking. But I have raised with him on several occasions my concern that the consumer-facing banks in Jersey are perhaps not always providing the services that islanders need. And I often see that from the small business perspective. And even in areas like hotels, I've heard about the difficulties of gaining finance and things like this. So what I do agree with is that the closure of a branch in Lake Ennevé is a closure of a branch which will have been used by many, many people in that area, will have been very useful, and particularly as we move, further into an island with a population that is older, then it seems to me that there is likely to be perhaps a greater call for rural branches. And so it is a concern of mine, and I do wonder if perhaps we could even think as an island of, rather than one branch, perhaps there can be one location, but with 3 or 4 banks operating out of that location. That's purely an idea, but yes, I absolutely recognise the concern. I do share that concern, and I'm happy to speak to the Financial Services Minister on that matter as well.
Supplemental question, Connie.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly, it wasn't just St Saviour, sir, but obviously our friends in Grouville and St Martin used to use that facility there. Lots of small businesses who do have cheques and payments to pay in now have to go into town, exacerbating the parking situation if you can find a space. And that's from that angle that I fired this question off to the Minister, sir, that we really need to get a grip on this. And maybe... I'm
afraid this is a speech, right?
I'm coming to it. Yes, sir.
But if we could have a question, that would be really, really helpful.
Yes, sir. If we could come together and make some facilities for local bank, does the Minister not agree?
The Minister does agree, and I think that was the thrust of my previous answer, was I do think this is an issue we should come together on. I think there are a number of areas, a number of aspects upon which the lack of bank branches touches, and I think exactly as the Constable said about the traffic impact is a really good example of how banking we think of as just purely finance, but actually in this case it also potentially has an impact on traffic in town and things like this. What I would also add is when people say to me there's never anywhere to park in town, I'll always retort there's always a space in Pier Road.
I just say from the presiding officer's point of view, asking does the minister agree or not agree seldom turns a speech into a question. And so if members could be careful and tailor their questions so they are quite
So
short.
may I suggest it seldom receives a short response from the minister either, sir?
Well, I'm holding off on that one so far. Deputy Aye.
Thank you, sir. Air display funding has been cut by approximately 100,000 to 40,000 over recent years. Is it the minister's intention to reduce that down to zero? And how much has been given in total to allow the event to go ahead this year? Thank you.
Sir, I thank the Deputy for his question, and it is not, I can state, this is not the Minister's intention to cut the air display funding to zero, and never has been the Minister's intention to do that. What the Minister would like to see is a very up-to-date, innovative, professionally organised air display, which is inclusive of all islanders. And in that respect, one thing I would like to see is perhaps a more commercial angle from the air display, so that it can raise its own funding. And I must say that I was absolutely delighted with both the crowdfunding initiative and the response to the crowdfunding initiative, because that's exactly the sort of thing I believe the air display organisers needed to do, rather than just purely turning to government for further grants, by saying, you know, trying to limit the grant to £40,000 when more was needed, rather than just coming solely to government and then saying, oh, the air display can't go ahead because government won't give us any more. By turning to crowdfunding, the air display organisers have shown that islanders are really willing to help out, and those islanders who are helping out through that area are obviously those islanders who value the air display more than the islanders who didn't. And so I'm really delighted with that initiative, and I do hope that the air display continues to seek other outlets for funding rather than just government funding.
Supplemental question, Deputy Owen?
Yes, sir. If you could just confirm that the amount was 40,000, that would be useful. But by his response, is he intending somehow to remove the current organisers? Does he intend to put it out to tender? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I can confirm the amount to date is £40,000. And we did hold an expressions of interest either last year or the year before, and we did receive some responses. But it was the case that they weren't ready to take over the air display, or it's not even take over the air display. Anyone can hold an air display. It's an entirely private event, but there was no response which seemed from our perspective to be worthy of shifting the funding to another organisation, which is why we have stayed with the Jersey International Air Display, and there are no current plans to hold another tender process.
Deputy Gold.
Thank you, sir. With regards to the living wage grant, will the Minister confirm whether business created after the announcement of the living wage was made would be able to access this grant scheme?
Thank you, sir. It's an interesting and it's obviously a very detailed point. I would have to get confirmation on whether there is a limit around that. Off the top of my head, I don't think there is. I do, but I cannot be sure, and I would have to go back and check, sir, to make sure I got the correct answer.
Supplemental? Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir. Can the Minister explain why the Social Security Fund was chosen as the source of funds for living wage transitional support?
Sir, that was a decision around the entire Council of Ministers table. I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to put my take on that alone, but I do believe there was an alignment between living wage and social security in itself, as in by paying a living wage, you're helping people not rely on social security perhaps in the same way. But please, it was a Council of Ministers decision, not my own ministerial decision, so I wouldn't like to speak for the entire Council of Ministers.
Supplemental, Deputy?
So I'm slightly surprised that the Minister doesn't have more interest in this, given that in the past the Assembly has proved highly resistant to using the Social Security Fund in this way, and therefore, surely does he accept that there is a risk that by choosing this method, he risks potentially losing the funding?
Thank you, sir. Again, I Two things, sir. One, I did not choose this method. It was the Council Minister's decision. It was not my decision. And number two, I have enormous interest in this area, sir. Please don't take a lack of desire to speak on behalf of a group of 11 people as a sign of a lack of interest from my part. I would hope, and I would seriously hope, that Assembly members don't try to remove that funding. I think it is really important. It's really important for us in the way that the budget is shaped for future years. And I think it's really important that we do provide support as we transition to this living wage. Were we not to provide that support, I think we will end up seeing significant pressures, which could lead to business failures within the economies.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The 2023 Jersey Business Annual Report accounts show that the productivity scheme in that year had 90 inquiries and 4 successful grants totalling £181,500 of grants. Given the Minister is proposing a £7 million productivity support scheme, what changes, if any, is he proposing to the scheme to enable it to be viably used within the planned period?
So Jersey Business has already improved on those figures for the subsequent year. If that's the 2023 report, then 2024 is certainly different, I believe, sir. And we are already working with Jersey Business to understand how best they will market the scheme, precisely because Jersey Business will be the organisation that is likely to deliver this, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, thank you, sir. Will the Minister confirm that the productivity support scheme has been running in 2024? And if so, will he endeavour to get updates on the data to States members in due course?
I believe so, sir. There's now an element of doubt in my mind just from the question itself. But I will go back and I will get an update on the status of the productivity support scheme as is, because now I think about it, we did pull back because of there was the earlier lack of interest, so we did want to redesign it to make sure we got more, but I'm sure we have been sending stuff out, but I will get an updated report.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. I was pleased to see the launch of the performance sport programme by Jersey Sport, using £120,000 approved by this Assembly in the last government plan. However, £150,000 a year had been budgeted under the Minister's remit for performance sport. Can the Minister explain where the remaining £30,000 has gone, please?
So I believe that's likely to be, given that 30,000 is 20% of the 150,000, that's due to the 20% cuts that were made to the government plan from last year.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, sir. The Jersey Sport programme is described as a pilot for 2024, which will be considered for delivery in 25 and beyond. Can the Minister assure the Assembly that if the Jersey Sport programme isn't considered to have been a success, the money will continue to be used to support performance sport in Jersey, just in another way?
I thank the Deputy for her question. I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. If the scheme is considered not to be a success, I would then turn to the Assistant Minister with the responsibility for sport to understand how he would want to improve the scheme to make it a success or redeploy that money in a way that does back sport rather than redeploying it somewhere else.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask, would the Minister advise if he is aware about the sentiments among the small businesses and local businesses that they feel that the government of Jersey procurement is broken, serving to act as a barrier to businesses being done than to supporting them engage with the government?
So it's sad, sir, but I agree wholeheartedly with that sentiment. I have serious concerns about the processes in procurement and how they make it difficult for local businesses to access procurement, the time it then takes for responses to come back. And the reason I know this is because I know how long it takes a small business to write a tender for any element of procurement. And then I have heard various examples of never hearing back from the government. It's taking months and months and months, despite this small business having spent perhaps a week or 2 weeks dropping all other work in order to do the tender process itself. So it does not surprise me that the Deputy is hearing this sort of concern from the business community, but I find it very sad that it does not surprise me, because it's something that I really wish we would enable small businesses to more easily procure from the government. And indeed, I brought my own proposition in 2019 to that effect. But sadly, I have not seen a great deal of change in regard to procurement from small businesses.
Supplemental question, Deputy Gardner.
I'm grateful for the Minister to his response, because this is the reality. Would the Minister engage with the Treasury Minister, who is responsible for procurement system, and maybe review the current existing policy, which can allow local small businesses especially to get easier access to the tenders?
Thank you, sir. I certainly will commit to speaking with the Treasury Minister about this. I mean, I do find in general, one of the, and this is for all states members, government processes in terms of outward-facing processes where the general public, in whatever regard, interact with government, they need to be improved in so many areas. And from the perspective of how islanders see government, if those processes are difficult, then islanders are guaranteed to come out with a negative impression of government. And so by purely improving those processes, it could be anything from getting a passport to procuring from government, it could be anything. If they are smooth and easy and understandable, then islanders themselves, I am sure, will end up with a better impression of the government that serves them.
With almost prescient timing, that brings the time available for questions to this Minister to a close. The next Minister is the Minister for Treasury and Resources, Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'll just apologise to the Minister, but this question's only come about because of a proposition that we have had published to us this morning. We see the proposition about the Westaway Trust being transferred into another trust fund. How many trust funds is the Minister responsible for?
I don't know how many trusts. I don't actually have that number. I think the Treasurer often, the Treasurer is involved in making many of those decisions, and I think there are other bodies and groups that have been established. I think there are quite a number of funds, and there are quite a number of groups and bodies who administer them. I know, for example, that there was a degree of, shall we say, rationalisation a year or two ago where management and decision-making around certain funds was moved from the Durats into, I believe, part of Treasury, but I can't remember the detail of that. So I don't know the exact number, but I can certainly ask that question. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, sir. And thank the Minister for her answer. My next question comes about with the review of the administration. You slightly touched on it, but would you commit to a full review to ensure that the best use of these funds are approached and what funds could be consolidated together to get the best returns?
Would the Minister commit? Not would you commit? Would the Minister commit?
I think that's a very interesting question. I think that is part of an ongoing process. As I say, there have been general reviews over the years to look at how these funds are managed. They are managed, I think, in a way that is professional as possible. And I think with the Westaway funds, the issue is simply that, well, there are two issues. Firstly, there are very small amounts of funds available. We are only allowed to spend the income rather than the capital. And once those funds are distributed among all the parishes, it's a very small amount to distribute, and because of the requirements of the use of the funds, it is actually very difficult to spend, and the initial objectives are, very difficult to effect in the current environment, and also it requires head teachers to be involved, and head teachers feel that they cannot make certain of the decisions that the original establishment would do. So we do keep a very close eye on all of these funds and ensure that they are managed in a common framework as much as possible and very carefully, and that distributions are made appropriately and as carefully as possible.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Following the announcement by Lloyds Bank that it's to close its St Brelard branch, and as we've heard, the St Saviour's branch, will the Minister state if she's had any communication at all with the leadership of Lloyds to confirm how they will adequately support customers who will be negatively impacted by these changes?
Sir, I think that's a question that sits with the Minister for Financial Services rather than the Minister for Treasury. As Treasury, no, we do not have that direct liaison point with banks. That sits with another minister.
Supplemental question?
Yes, thank you, sir. I thank the Minister for her answer. Perhaps I'll put that into a written question to the other Minister. This may go along the same lines, but other companies, as part of their operating licences, have public service obligations. And I was just wondering whether the Minister would consider introducing a similar obligation for high street banks, which would protect important public services.
Again, I think that's a question for the Minister for External Relations, but as I am his Assistant Minister, I would have to say that I think that would be an incredibly difficult thing to achieve. Banks are businesses, and as soon as you start imposing obligations on them to keep branches open, we will all lose free banking. We all expect to go and take money out and it not cost us anything, and we will all start to pay for the provision of banking, as you did in the old days, apparently. I would think it's a very difficult thing to achieve.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. During the presentation of the budget proposition P51, which will be debated at the end of November, which was the subject of a presentation by the Treasury Minister and the Chief Minister and other ministers, I was able to attend that, and I asked whether or not the ministers would be providing a full list of all the reports and other documentation, of which some of which has been referred to earlier, in advance of the budget. So could I restate the question? Will the Minister commit to providing a list of all the documents, any further information about the budget, when it's going to be lodged and what it's about, so that members have full sight of what's coming?
So I have to confess, I'm not quite sure what reports the Deputy would like to see. The budget is a fairly significant document. There is an annex, which I've just given back to Chief Minister, which is fairly significant. If the Deputy would like to tell me what reports he wants to see, we can answer the question, but I don't understand what he wants.
Okay. Let me be a little clearer, sir. What does the government plan to publish for members about the budget that members might not be aware about? It's about for them, sir, it's about for the government to explain to members what reports that are going to be produced in advance of the budget, because we don't know what we don't know, sir.
Sir, again, I'm at a loss. We have published the budget, the report on the budget and the appendix to the budget. I believe that's what all governments have published in the past, and if again, I would need greater. I simply don't understand what the Deputy is asking for. That he's. If he could give me a list of what was published last year that has not been published now, I will look into that. But I simply don't understand what he wants, sir.
I really don't want to take up any more time, but so there's a list of documents which are going to be provided, such as the health funding, the productivity fund, all others that we don't know anything about. They're just headline numbers, and we need to know the detail.
Well, I think we have to move on from that question. You've made the point, and it could be that there can be a communication outside of question period for that purpose. Deputy IA.
Thank you, sir. In the Income Forecasting Group's report R130 2024, their forecast for personal income tax was adjusted down. Has this now materialised, and what action has the Minister taken to compensate for this possible shortfall in revenue? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Sir, I think, yes, that forecast was taken into account in preparation of the budget, and it has been accounted for in the way we have compiled the budget. The budget has been lodged, and you'll see our spending proposals, which take that into account. I'm not sure if it has. I don't have that detail in front of me as to what income tax is down, what the current income tax figure is. But we will have taken those forecasts into account in establishing the budget. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Will she consider not increasing the income tax threshold in the future to try to bolster annual income tax revenue? Thank you, sir.
I would think that's quite unlikely, sir. We have increased we increase the personal tax allowance threshold every year. We're doing so this year. We have a very high, in comparison with other neighbouring jurisdictions, we have a very high personal tax allowance. But I see no reason why we would. It is not in my plan at the moment to not increase it. Thank you.
Deputy Renouf.
Yes, so just to return to the question about Lloyds for a moment, the Assistant Minister for Treasury and Resources she has ultimate responsibility for that area. And I wonder, therefore, whether she couldn't talk a little bit more about her reaction to the closure of bank branches, I beg your pardon, in rural parts of the island or less urban parts of the island. And in particular, whether she isn't prepared to discuss with banks things like the potential sharing of branches, potential use of government buildings for branches, for example, the letting of buildings in the Kennebec Parade, which could be sublet to banks for their operations on a part-time basis and so on. In other words, will she consider looking at those potential other solutions?
Minister.
Sir, I can only say again, I am here this morning as Minister for Treasury. That is a matter for the Minister for External Relations and Financial Services, and I suggest the Deputy raises those questions with that Minister.
Supplemental question, Deputy. Thank you. Deputy Tadier.
Insofar as it affects the overall revenue that the Minister has to spend, does the Minister have any concerns about the unintended consequences of drives towards productivity by businesses, which may entail ultimately a significant reduction in staff, especially where AI or automation is used, for example, in supermarkets, which might result in lower tax revenues to the Treasury, especially if businesses that are more productive are ultimately not paying tax as businesses?
Minister.
Am I concerned about that immediately? No, I'm not. I think we do want our business to be more productive. We want government to be more productive. But I think we have to remember that we are virtually at full employment. Most businesses say that they are still crying out for staff. So I think even with productivity enhancements, I think it's a very long way to go before we start seeing mass unemployment in the island. Clearly, if that was a risk, then that would be a concern. I think we do want business being more productive, and it's not just a case of productivity does not necessarily mean a reduction in headcount. It means better value added, and it means that the employees you have are paid more because they're doing better and more productive and more profitable work. So I do not think that there is an immediate cause for concern in terms of enhanced productivity and the use of AI in the island. I think it could only be to our advantage. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Tadier.
Yes, sir. Of course, it doesn't mean a reduction in services or headcount, but it can mean, for example, the closure of certain branches of banks. It can mean that tills with people are taken out of shops and replaced by machines that are automated that don't pay tax, and ultimately that there could, and it's likely that in fact that there will be a shortfall in tax receipts. So can the Minister reassure the Assembly that she is taking into account the potential downsides of the fact that there is good productivity and there's bad productivity, and what that might mean for future tax receipts?
So I think this is a subject for the Fiscal Policy Panel. I'm sure they will comment on that in due course. My own observation is that putting in self-service tills doesn't necessarily seem to be reducing the number of staff, and that there's just as many staff wandering around helping people with their self-service tills as there were operating the tills in the first place. I'm sure the Fiscal Policy Panel will keep that in mind. It's a thing, clearly, I agree with them, it's something we have to continue to focus on. But I think if someone, instead of operating a till, is doing a better high-value job, earning more money, then that may be a better thing for the island in terms of tax receipts. Thank you.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. We've just heard from the Sustainable Economic Development Minister that 20% cuts have been made to government plan growth that had been agreed by this Assembly last year. Can the Minister explain when, why and how this decision was taken, and if cuts were applied across the board or were some areas protected? Thank you.
As the Deputy will, I am quite sure, understand, those decisions were taken by the Council of Ministers over a series of discussions about the budget for next year, and taking into account the finances for this year, taking out the other demands that arise as they do mid-year for funding. I think the 20% was split generally across very many growth bids. There were very few, I don't recollect any particular exemptions, apart from possibly in health and possibly in education and the maintenance of frontline services. But the 20% was divided in a very even way with the agreement of the Council of Ministers.
Supplemental question.
Thank you. Were any risks identified in this approach around the deliverability of the priorities that the growth had been intended to fund? And if so, which does the Minister consider to be at the highest risk of being impacted?
Risk assessments would have been conducted or will be conducted by the relevant departments, so yes, that work would be done.
I'm afraid that brings the time period within questions can be asked this Minister to an end. We now move to questions of the Chief Minister. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. I hope the Chief Minister was listening when the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development said that he was unable to speak for the Council of Ministers on the question of where the money for the living wage financial support scheme is coming from. I'm hoping that the Chief Minister can therefore answer the question which I asked the Minister, which was, can he explain why the Social Security Fund was chosen as the source of funds for living wage transitional support?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. The Social Security Fund, supplemented by the taxpayer annually, it will still be supplemented, sir. Figures were worked out, and perhaps the Social Security Minister or the Treasury Minister would have figures more readily available, sir, but it was possible to reduce the supplementation to the fund while still providing enough money for the fund to meet its commitments. So there was a surplus there, so it was decided it would be prudent to utilise that money for the economy to help businesses deal with the living wage, sir, because that would not impact negatively upon the fund, although that would mean the fund would get less money. The fund is still sufficiently supported to meet its objectives and obligations.
Supplemental question, Deputy Renouf.
Yes, so it's a very interesting answer because last year the Chief Minister took a very different view. 7 current ministers voted against the previous government's attempt to borrow, or as it was described by Deputy Balash at the time, plunder from the Social Security Fund. Just to remind everyone, they were the Constable of St John, Deputies Feltham, Lahegara, Luce, Mesick, Rob Ward, and of course the Chief Minister himself, all of which voted on a fundamental point of principle against raiding the Social Security Fund in this way. So what's changed?
I just wonder, I'm trying to remember which way the Deputy himself voted. I think he probably supported it.
Well, I think the question is what's changed?
What's changed, sir? Well, I suppose I'm happy to change my mind when presented with new evidence or information. As I've explained in this instance, we can still provide sufficient sums for the fund, and that's absolutely key, without compromising the fund. So that's at the heart of what's changed, and I think that's what's changed for the government. So we can still provide sufficient funds to ensure it's not compromised in any way, whilst utilising additional money to support businesses with the transition to living wage.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. So I was asked by a constituent why the Esplanade car park has not been returned to its former use in much the same way as Kensington Place remains unused and Cyril Marcon public parking remains empty, whilst a private sector developer in the meantime has opened up a commercial street development where they are now letting cars park. If the vision for town is to encourage more shoppers, surely the Chief Minister should be chasing down the respective ALOs and government departments to use these spaces more effectively. Can he explain to the Assembly why this government is doing so little to back the retailers and small businesses of St Helier?
Chief Minister.
Well, sir, I happen to agree with the Deputy that parking is important for the rejuvenation of town, for the maintenance of town, for the interests of the residents and the businesses. And we do have a sufficient car parking available, sir, albeit not all in ideal locations. And so I would like to see some progress there. I'd like to see not only with being more thoughtful with our existing facilities, but also I would like to see, and we'll see when we introduce plans to rejuvenate St Helier, I would like to see more focus on providing parking for residents, but especially to support the development of the town economy.
Supplemental question, Deputy Ward?
No, thanks, sir.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I'll get a chance to ask my question now. Chief Minister, can the Chief Minister explain how his plans are preparing a civil service fit for the future, particularly with regard to modernising and transforming the work of the civil service? And can he just help us understand a little bit more about what this entails?
Thank you, sir. Well, the aim of this government is to curb growth. The increase in the budget over, 25 budget over the 24 budget is just over 5%. Growth in 24 over 23 was over 9%. We started to see budgets beginning to see exponential growth year on year, which was unsustainable. So rather than restructure the public sector, we're reshaping the senior leadership structures, because the Chief Executive Officer has identified, ministers have identified there perhaps is we are perhaps overstaffed in certain areas, and we can reprioritise and utilise the resources saved into areas of essential services, and those areas supported in the common strategic policy. So, and the Chief Executive Officer is working closely with ministerial teams and senior officers to oversee this transition and reshaping of the senior management structures.
Supplemental question, Deputy Wilson?
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister explain what therefore is being done to build future capability, given that there are going to be people moving around, there are going to be people leaving? How are we actually going to attract future civil servants of the future, and how will we replenish the skill base of the service?
I think so. That's a very good question. It's at the heart of the decision making on this, because we want to make sure that our public sector is more productive, and resources are aimed most at where they are needed. A lot of the savings we're making, we've in the budget, there is proposed £15 million of payroll savings, but savings will be targeted to areas of frontline services and areas where we need them most, and that's where we're health, education, for example, and that's where we need to focus on recruiting the specialist expert workforce that we need, sir. Whilst having said so that we are reshaping senior management structures, they still will be, I would say, very, there'd be ample resource left in senior management structures to not only continue to do very good work, sir, but also to be able to attract the best people in the future.
Deputy Joseph.
So, calling to mind the CM in his previous role, statements regarding the cannabis industry and its sector, and statements that the industry was going to be one that was going to rival the size of the finance industry. As the cannabis industry involves the oversight by the Chief Minister of a number of other ministerial departments, such as planning, health, economic development and home affairs, could he update, or perhaps would he prepare an update for the Assembly of how the industry is doing, what its challenges are, and is it meeting those expectations that were set in this place a number of years ago?
I don't believe I ever said that the cannabis sector could rival the size of the financial service sector. But I did say at the time when I was Minister for the Economy, sir, and of course agriculture comes under that, that it could be a significant sector if we allowed it to grow, if you'll excuse the phrase. That is a question that needs to be directed at the Minister responsible, which is the Minister for Economic Development, sir. But I will discuss that with him and ask if he's prepared, together with other ministers who may have an involvement, to provide an update. Thank you.
Supplemental question.
I think the Assembly needs some update on that, and the Chief Minister is in the position to coordinate his ministers, so I'm grateful for the response.
Are there any other questions for the Chief Minister? Deputy General.
Thank you, sir. We've heard from the Chief Minister that there will be no departmental business plans for 2025. Could the Minister advise how the public and the Assembly will know what is actually being done in 2025, and what tool will there be to let the public and the Assembly know which each department is doing?
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry if I was unclear. We are producing departmental business plans, but not ministerial business plans. We're aiming to combine the two, sir, and that work is underway.
Supplemental question, Deputy Chair?
Yes, sir. Could the Minister give a timeline for when these will be available, and how will multi-sectoral issues get captured within these departmental plans if ministerial plans are not developed?
Thank you, sir. They're due, I understand, for publication in Q4, which we'll be heading into shortly, if not sooner. I think some are ready now. And could you repeat the second part of the question, please?
How will multi-sectoral issues be captured, so between departments, those bigger strategic priorities?
It's a difficult question to answer, sir, without knowing the independent issues, because they'll be dealt with in different ways. Where there are overlapping areas or juxtapositions, then ministerial teams and officials will deal with them accordingly. So without a specific question, sir, I can't answer that, but I will say that ministers and departments will work in a collaborative way to ensure any multi-sectoral issues are dealt with appropriately.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister set out the aims of the restructuring of the communications unit and how success against those aims will be measured?
I can't provide that off the top of my head, but speaking generally, we inherited a communications department with some excellent people, but it was simply too large for the organisation. And so there's no science attached to this other than we want to reduce the size to make sure it's appropriate for what we do. And that's exactly what we're doing. So,
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. And what steps are being taken to ensure that the savings as set out in the budget and the savings in headcount that I think are alluded to in there will be actual savings and not just costs spread elsewhere, either through departments taking on their own staff or outsourcing costs elsewhere? Is it about headcount? Is it about cost? Is it about both? And what steps are being taken to guard against that?
It is about curbing the growth, the financial growth in the public sector to reduce or to stop the chance of new positions being created. The Chief Executive has applied recruitment freeze until March of next year. Of course, that excludes essential health and essential staff, sir. And the money saved has been, or the reprioritisation of spending and the savings we make from curbing the growth in the public sector has been either reprioritised to some essential services or directed towards the government's priorities in the common strategic policy, which include transition to a living wage, extended nursery and childcare provision, the continuation of the school meal programme, reduction in GP fees, provision of more affordable homes, and government reduction in government fees and duties to keep them as low as possible. That's just some examples of where that money will be redirected.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. What consideration, if any, has the Chief Minister given to introducing new ways for his ministers to engage with the public about their policies and their actions?
I'm sorry, sir. Could you just repeat?
That's rapidly approaching 2 fines.
Right.
Could you repeat?
Thank you, sir. I will continue.
I'll give her half a minute's injury time.
Thank you. We'll start again. What consideration, if any, has the Chief Minister given to introducing new ways for his ministers to interact and engage with the public on their policy and their delivery?
There are, yes, perhaps if you were deputy, but remarking that there is a fine due, of course, for the interruption. Not at all, no. I don't think it was a policy to stop the question being asked, but would you go for it again? We will add.
Does the Chief Minister require the question again?
Right.
Saved by the bell, almost. Well, sir, I believe states members and ministers are amongst the most approachable and available, accessible to the public, and continue to do so, as we all do as states members on a daily basis. We will, once we have the budget completed, we have our first year out of the way, so we will discuss ways we may consider meeting with members of the public. Of course, I think we've all benefited from the constituency surgeries that we're doing in the district following the last election. And I know ministers, including myself, always try to play a part in those. So that's gone some way to bridging the gap.
Supplemental question.
Very quickly, and I hope I do get that 30 seconds for the Minister to reply. One constituent suggested that a useful way for ministers to interact would be through fielding, perhaps much as states members do with, our ministers do with Quan to the states, but a streamed and published to media monthly Quan equivalent, questions without notice equivalent to members of the public. Will he give due consideration to a minister's answering questions from the public, and will he discuss that with the Council of Ministers, as I believe that would be a very productive way for his council to engage with the public?
Yes, sir, happy to discuss that in detail with the Council of Ministers. So just using up my 30 seconds injury time.
Very well. Well, that does bring the allocated time for questions to ministers to an end, and therefore we have reached, I think, 12:37. We would now move on to public business, but it strikes me that our members...
Adjournment, sir.
The adjournment is proposed. Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.